Monday morning elsewhere, a grey start in places, some mist and fog patches, but once these clear, there'll be plenty of sunny spells, particularly across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Cloudier generally for the rest of England, Wales, with this rain slowly pushing its way eastwards across southern counties, turning heavy at times. Some localised flooding is possible. For most temperatures near average, 7 to 9 Celsius, 10 or 11, but the strength of the wind just making it feel colder here. For Monday, early rain across the southeast, some uncertainty how quickly this will clear away, but for many after a chilly start, it will be a fine day, plenty of sunny spells, just a few showers, but quite a keen east-northeasterly breeze, particularly in the east. Over the next few days, it stays unsettled with further spells of rain, temperatures generally near or a little above average.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So the highway code was amended recently. Passed me by, but anyway, a new poll suggests this has made no difference to the safety of road users, and I could believe that.
Yeah, there was an awful crash in London, wasn't there? A bus and a pedestrian yesterday.
Fatality.
So we're asking, is the highway code fit for purpose, or should we just scrap it altogether? That's our debate this morning, and we're joined by Danny Kelly. She argues highways are not fit for purpose, and cycling instructor Anna Hughes thinks they are. Good morning to you both.
You see, Anna, I think it's a good thing. I think the highway code is a good thing. I just don't think that any of us pay any attention to it, or we should all be tested on it quite regularly, I would have thought. We should have revision courses in it.
Yeah, I think you just summed it up, Eamon, by saying the changes passed you by. I actually asked a few of my fellow cyclists and pedestrians, what is classified as vulnerable road users, about this very thing. I said, has the new highway code made things safer for you? And most people said, not at all. Drivers don't know what it is. They don't know what the changes are. They probably don't know what the rules are to start with. And as you've just said, doing refreshers is a really good idea. It's a bit bizarre that we're given a license to operate this quite dangerous machinery, and then we're never tested again, and especially not on the highway code, which is, especially when it changes, why wouldn't we be retested on that or have to do refresher courses on it? You know, there are conflicts on the road, there are fatalities. It makes sense to be aware of what the highway code says, because it is there to keep us safe.
Yeah, Danny Kelly, when I think back, I think it was 1999 I passed my driving test. Hardly any bikes on the road then, to be honest, probably virtually none.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good evening, it's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, we are living in an age of intolerance and mob rule. At this point, our very democracy is on the line. My Mark Meets guest is the author of best-selling biographies on Ken Dodd and Larry Grayson, and he wrote for the two Ronnies. We'll remember two legends of comedy very shortly. In the big story, Nigel Farage goes down a storm in the United States. I'll get reaction from Donald Trump's former chief of staff, joining me live from the US. In my Take at 10, Prince William has made a huge mistake by commenting on the war in Gaza. He should stick to opening hospitals and kissing babies. Yes, I'm going to get sent to the tower for my take at 10. Do I care? Do I ever? 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. Mark Dolan tonight is your perfect Saturday night in. You've worked hard all week, so do you want to relax now, have a bit of entertainment, have a bit of a laugh, maybe a cold beer, maybe a glass of wine, or a nice big cup of tea and some custard cream biscuits. Whatever you fancy, let's go for it and let's do the next 2 hours together. We start, and the headlines, Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The UK has reaffirmed its commitment to Ukraine as the country's war with Russia enters its third year. £245 million has been promised to boost critical stockpiles of ammunition. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says he's proud that since the invasion, the UK has trained 60,000 Ukrainian troops, adding that no one has done as much for Kyiv than the UK. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been in Kyiv. He's been speaking exclusively to GB News, praising the war-torn country.
They've taken out thousands and thousands of Russian tanks, 40% of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, and yet Ukraine's exports are now back up to pre-war levels. So I've got absolutely no doubt that with the right support from the West, Ukraine can win. And it's vital in the months ahead that we give them that support. This is an unconventional report, but here we are in Kyiv on the sad second anniversary with a Ukrainian population that, in my view, is absolutely determined still to win, and they're going to win.
Meanwhile, the King and Queen have praised Ukrainians for their true valour. King Charles also says he's greatly encouraged by the efforts of the UK and its allies in supporting Kyiv at a time of suffering and need. The monarch was paying his respects at a Ukrainian cathedral in central London, where crowds later gathered to show their support for the country and its people. Commemorations began with an interfaith prayer, and similar services have been held across the UK. Lee Anderson has been suspended from the Tory party. It comes after the former deputy chair said the London mayor had given the capital away and was controlled by Islamists. The Prime Minister was under pressure to react after Sadiq Khan said his deafening silence was condoning racism. While the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has now weighed in, saying Rishi Sunak's weakness means that Tory MPs can act with impunity, he says. A spokesperson for the party's chief whip says the MP was suspended for refusing to apologise for his comments. In a statement, Anderson said, "I fully accept they had no option but to suspend the whip in these circumstances. However, I'll continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia." The body of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been handed over to his mother. He unexpectedly died in prison 9 days ago. His death certificate says it was of natural causes. His spokeswoman says it's still not clear whether authorities will allow relatives to hold a funeral the way his family wants and the way he deserves. And finally, junior doctors in England have walked out for the 10th time since March last year over a pay dispute. This time, they're striking for 5 days. The British Medical Association has asked for a 35% pay rise. The government says that's unreasonable. More than 1.3 million appointments and operations have already been cancelled or rescheduled since the action began. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Mark.
My thanks to the brilliant Tatiana Sanchez, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight and your perfect Saturday night in. In my big opinion, we are living in an age of intolerance and mob rule. At this point, our very democracy is on the line. In the big story, Nigel Farage goes down a storm in the United States. I'll get a reaction from Donald Trump's former chief of staff, joining me live from America. My Mark Meets guest is the author of best-selling biographies on Ken Dodd and Larry Grayson. We'll be remembering two legends of comedy very shortly. In my take at 10, Prince William has made a huge mistake by commenting on the war in Gaza. He should stick to opening hospitals and kissing babies. King Charles reduced to tears by public support following his cancer diagnosis, and rumours of a work divorce for Harry and Meghan. The Queen of US Royal Reporting, Kinsey Schofield, brings reaction. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages at 10:30 sharp with 3 top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, journalist and model Diana Moran, author and commentator Laura Dodsworth, and campaigner and writer Chris Wilde. Abortion at any stage is to be decriminalised in the UK. I'll get reaction from TV star Channel 4's Kim Woodburn. Plus, the most important part of the show, your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So, a big 2 hours to come. It is Saturday night, so should we have some fun? I think so. Let's start with my big opinion. We are living in an age of intolerance. In 2024, if someone disagrees with you, not only is there a difference of opinion, you are a bad person. You are the enemy. The healthy competition of ideas has made way for cult-like ideologies, political scripture, unbending narratives, and tribal loyalties. Whether it's Brexit, pandemic measures, the conflict in Gaza, trans rights, net zero, there is a correct opinion and a wrong opinion. All of these issues are subject to the tyranny of what in most cases is a tiny minority. But the capture of our public and private institutions by bonkers progressive ideas like the idea that the West is shameful and our history is something to apologise for, the idea that you can change your biological sex like that, the idea that the planet's about to blow up next Tuesday, not to mention a total assault on rationality and science. All of this has been achieved without a single vote being cast. The woke mob, who reflects only a small portion of British public opinion, estimated by the politics professor Matthew Goodwin to be less than 10% of the population, dominate our politics, are rife in the public and private sector, and seem to enjoy a majority stake in our media. The latest is this extraordinary story in the Daily Telegraph, which reveals that the top Russell Group universities believe that the idea of the best person for the job is a microaggression. That's right, folks. Merit is dead, and being good at things is a bad thing. As far as I'm concerned, the downfall of the West can't happen fast enough. Bring popcorn. Our country is changing without public consent, and certainly without any public enthusiasm. Ordinary people across the land are sick and tired of living in a country where they're afraid of what to say or what to think. I predict there will be a cultural backlash, and it will eventually correct the other way, and we'll get back to normal. Common sense, the truth, facts will win. But without realising it, we've sleepwalked into a more serious and troubling crisis, one which is threatening the rule of law and our democracy. Whether it's Insulate Britain gluing themselves to the motorway and rather than being arrested asked whether they'd like a drink or a sandwich, whether it's dozy cops watching in silence as eco-protesters smash up the windows of bank headquarters, whether it's Islamic extremists chanting anti-Semitic slurs and literally projecting hate speech onto Big Ben, which we saw this week, the police and the wider criminal justice system appear to have given up enforcing the law or have indulged in a very forgiving interpretation of it. Labour MPs are now too terrified to vote against a ceasefire in the Middle East. Frontbenchers like Rachel Reeves, Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner are ambushed by aggressive extreme thugs because of their party's position on Israel and its right to self-defence. The Tory MP for the largely Jewish constituency of Golders Green is to stand down at the next election because of death threats. Another MP, Andrew Percy, said this week that he felt safer in Israel than in the United Kingdom. Jewish kids can't go to school wearing any religious clothing. for fear of attack. Jews now avoid our major cities at the weekend when those so-called peace marches are happening. Now, many do march in peace. They want an end to the bloodshed, but too many do not. The ballot box has been replaced by activist politics and, frankly, anarchy. The Guardian newspaper published an opinion piece by Just Stop Oil encouraging protesters to turn up at the homes of MPs who do not comply with their radical and, let's be honest, harebrained agenda. We've got blasphemy laws now by the back door, not voted for by the British people, with a 14-year-old autistic boy in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, subjected to a terrifying kangaroo court after accidentally scuffing a copy of the Quran, as dozy local cops nod their heads in meek compliance. A schoolteacher in Batley, still on the run for showing an image of the Prophet Muhammad as an educational tool. And MPs didn't want to risk voting a certain way this week for fear of violence and reprisals. Not my words, the words of the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer. That is what he told Speaker Hoyle, which saw the vote scrapped. Our laws, our traditions, our values and our democracy are being fatally eroded. The authorities are asleep at the wheel and a crash is coming. Soon, Britain will be a write-off. I do think that Britain is descending into mob rule. It's not happening immediately, but it's coming. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.com. I'll get to your emails shortly. But first, my top pundits, journalist and model Diana Moran, author and commentator Laura Dodsworth, and campaigner and writer Chris Wilde. Laura Dodsworth, am I exaggerating? Is Britain descending into mob rule?
Well, you started off by saying that if there's a disagreement or a difference of opinion, then you're a bad person. Well, I must be a really good person because I agreed with every single word. That was searing. It was brilliant. I mean, there's so much in there. It's hard to know where to begin, but there's 2 points I'd like to make, really. First of all, one theme that links a lot of the things you brought up is that these days we're supposed to be a bit ashamed of ourselves as British people. And I never feel ashamed of Britain or British people, but this week I truly felt ashamed of our institutions. I was ashamed that the police allowed genocidal slogans to be emblazoned on Westminster and allowed mobs to try to alter the course of parliamentary procedure and democracy, that an MP is standing down, that all these things are going on. You know, it just makes you ashamed. What we need is strong, sure policing without fear or favour, and that's not what we've got at the moment. I'm sick of it, and I think most of the nation is absolutely sick of it. The other thing I want to pick up on is it's depressing, but it's also funny, it's laughable. The idea that the Russell Group universities say it's a microaggression if you believe that the best person got the job. And presumably this is to kind of soften the blow for people that have a protected characteristic or some form of disability that might prevent them from getting a job. But we should just be able to recognise merit where it exists. If we don't, we head towards a society where we diminish and we do down excellence, endeavour, invention and artistry. You know, there's a book I was just sent recently. It's by the brilliant author Lionel Shriver. It's called Mania. It comes out in spring. I've been sent a review copy. And I thought, wow, this sounds like a really clever idea for a work of fiction. It's a sort of dystopic parallel world where everyone is supposed to be of equal intelligence and you're not allowed to point out that we have different abilities. And I thought, well, this is clever, but it's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? Wokery will never go that far. And, oh, look, wokery is going that far this week.
Well said, Laura Dodsworth. Chris Wilde, perhaps I'm wrong, perhaps society is changing and democracy is changing. It's not being diluted or attacked, it's just in a process of transition. What do you think?
Yeah, the world is changing, and I think with my work, I work in the communities, I work with a lot of young people. I hear this kind of, you know, this rhetoric every day, this language, the lexicon, everything's changing. And I think you've got a lot of angry young people out there who don't really know what they're angry about. And I think that's kind of a lot of the catalyst within, you know, the new way of living. People are just looking for things to hang on to. They're looking for a purpose. And I think one of the main reasons people are like this at the moment, when there is this precarious times and this mass uncertainty, and that's because we've got a really poor government. We have for so long leadership. We've got poor leadership. You know, there's nothing to look up to. There's no role models within our parliamentary figures. And that's why we've got these uncertain times. And that's why we've got all these things allowed to happen within society. It's nothing new. It will kind of fade away. Hopefully one day people will get bored. But it's going to be like this for a long time until we have somebody who we all can look up to and say, that's a leader, that's the person I want to follow, that's the person I respect, and that's the person who's going to change the way we live our life in this society.
Diana Moran, am I overstating the threat to our democracy and to our culture and values?
No, I don't think you are, Mark. I have watched what's been going on this week with great interest, which incidentally GB News have covered superbly, and I am really depressed. I'm an older person. I've seen good times, I've seen some bad times, but I'm really, really worried about the time that we are now in. All this woke nonsense is just ridiculous. And then as you've got children and you've got young people, we should be encouraging them to make the most of themselves, not only for what they can do for society, but for themselves. You know, mental health comes into this, and if you're trying hard and you're, getting results, you're doing the best you can, you're going to feel better about yourself and therefore give the best of yourself to the world.
Is Britain descending into anarchy? Is there a threat to our democracy? Let me know your thoughts. Perhaps it's just an example of a healthy democracy where people are on their streets making their views known. Mark Dolan tonight is the home of diverse opinion. Get yours over to me. mark@gbnews.com. But next up in the big story, Nigel Farage goes down a storm in the United States. I'll get reaction from Donald Trump's former chief of staff live from the US, plus a top US political author as well. It's a two-header. You won't want to miss it. That's next.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight are author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, in my big opinion, I've said that I think Britain is descending into anarchy and mob rule. You've got Labour MPs afraid to vote against a ceasefire for fear of physical attack. That is not a democracy. Well, you don't all agree with me. That's what this show's all about. Richard says, "Hi, Mark. You are fanning the flames of fear and hysteria, doing your best to whip up a frenzy and blowing everything out of proportion. Have a custard cream, a nice mug of Ovaltine, and calm down," says Richard. Plus, he adds, "Great show." Thank you, Richard, for your kind words. Carl in Nottingham says, "Great monologue, Mark. Totally agree with everything you said. Like you, I think the pendulum will swing the other way and facts and truth will win the day. What happened in Parliament earlier in the week was a disgrace. Starmer and Hoyle should hang their heads in shame for bowing down to the woke mob, the braying woke mob. This woke nonsense has to stop," says Carl. Paul says, "The future of Britain, no parliament, no government and no police force. Just a bunch of thugs running the country." From a mosque in Preston, he says. Now, Paul, that's not a sentiment I would share, but of course you're entitled to your view. Laura Dodsworth has spoken the word of millions. We are descending into anarchy through woke. And finally, Margaret, who says, "Mark, I fully agree with everything you said at the beginning of your programme. Not enough people are prepared to speak out. Well, Margaret, speak out, I will." OK, folks, lots more to get through. I'll be dealing with Prince William in no uncertain terms at 10 o'clock. And producer Maria's warned me. She's like, he's going to be the king at some point. I don't care. I'll be dealing with this privileged prince at 10 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. But last night, GB News star Nigel Farage made quite the splash over in Washington, D.C. at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, a gathering of Republican supporters. Here is what he told the crowd.
And whilst I still have some reservations about the way in which the electoral system has been cleaned up state by state, and I still have some concerns about that, I'm still in no doubt that on November the 5th, we're going to get Donald Trump back elected and in the White House.
Let's get reaction now from one of America's most influential Republican voices, Donald Trump's former Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, and joining us live from the CPAC conference in Washington, D.C., Drew Allen, broadcaster, political commentator, and the author of this brand new best-selling book, which has got America talking. It's called America's Last Stand. Will you vote to save or destroy America in 2024? So, Mick Mulvaney and Drew Allen, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Mick Mulvaney, your reaction to what Nigel Farage had to say about your former boss, Donald Trump?
Oh, it's right. It's exactly what you would expect from Nigel. This is not his first time in CPAC. I know when I was chief of staff and we had taken the president over there a couple of times, Nigel is a regular on the CPAC stage. So people know him. They're familiar with him. They know why he's important and why he's famous. So it was very interesting to I was watching the panel discussion earlier to have Nigel explain to the people there what happened at Big Ben over the weekend with the from the river to the sea being projected on the side of the building. That was a big deal here. That rings very true to us. That sounds like it's out of place. And of course, most of what Nigel said would fall on fertile fields at CPAC. It's a very conservative group. But no, he's a regular. He always does extraordinarily well. He's an excellent speaker. And of course, last night was no exception.
Drew Allen, congratulations on the success you've had with the book. Many of the themes that Nigel referenced are in your book. You're at CPAC as we speak. How did Nigel's speech go down?
Well, it went down tremendously. Yes, he's speaking to fertile soil, as was said correctly. But you know what's interesting about it is he understands the existential nature of the 2024 election, and that has been a theme, and that's something that was echoed by Trump as well. And that's so important that we understand the gravity of what's at stake for 2024, because every American, and it's not just the thing about CPAC 2 and Nigel and everything else, is that this is worldwide what's going on. A discussion about what the role of government is supposed to be in our lives, and America's supposed to be the gold standard of that, with a constitution that says we the people are master and those in government are servant. But of course it's been flipped, and other countries are also fighting for their freedom. So Nigel's tremendous, and it was wonderful to see his presence here. It's my first CPAC, actually.
Mick Mulvaney, whilst I've got you, Donald Trump has just finished his keynote to CPAC. Did he have anything interesting to say? He normally does.
He normally does. What's fun for me is I sort of watch, because you can tell when you've seen Trump speak enough when he's going off the teleprompter and when he's sort of riffing. He spoke for an hour and a half today. The speech as written out was probably 45 minutes. So that's 2 to 1 in terms of the amount of just making stuff up as he went. He's really good when he does that. It was pretty basic themes. He did not mention Nikki Haley. Today, as I sit here in South Carolina, is the South Carolina Republican primary. Trump is expected to win by at least 20 and maybe as many as 30 points. It's got a lot of Republicans wondering why Nikki Haley is still in the race. But what I think you saw today, yes, Trump was speaking to CPAC, which is a Republican primary base, right? But he's going to start transitioning now, effectively today, into his general campaign, his general election campaign against Joe Biden. So you might see the language change a little bit. But the one thing about Donald Trump is he doesn't really know two speeds. He's all in all of the time. So he will begin his campaign now in full against Joe Biden, and there will be continued fireworks every single day for the next, 8 months.
Now, Drew Allen, Nigel Farage was effusive in his support for Donald Trump as the Republican nominee for the presidential race and, of course, to become president in January of 2025. Of course, the election is in November. What are the major obstacles that face Donald Trump between now and then?
Well, it's the continued political persecution, the lawfare that's going on, them trying to put him in prison. Of course, I mean, that's a great obstacle. I think that ensuring that our elections are as cleaned up as possible is another obstacle. But I think that, as long as he stays on target, I think that he moved the right direction. I was in the room when he spoke today. He's very much like the George Washington for our time, and I say that seriously. He's moving past factionalism. He's talking about we're the party of common sense. He's speaking to the American citizen. He's going to be an American president. Forget the factions. Those don't matter. We are going down in a dumpster fire right now. And as he pointed out, too, in there, he said we're going to lose the country if we don't reelect him. But look, he went off the teleprompter basically the whole time. And I would challenge any American to have been in that room or to hear a speech like that and not love the man, because he obviously loves us and America, because he's so funny. He told so many stories. We were laughing hysterically, and he's a human being, and that's the bond he has with the voter.
However, Mick Mulvaney, do you have reservations about the possibility of Donald Trump returning to the White House, given the fact that we had the debacle of January the 6th, which was something of a national crisis for America, and the fact that the president still hasn't accepted the result of the last election?
Mark, what I really worry about going into a potential second Trump term, and let's make it perfectly clear, as between Trump and Biden, I will be supporting Donald Trump, period, end of story. Biden is a real problem. We can talk about that more if you want to another time. The thing that concerns me most about Trump, and probably what contributed heavily to January 6th, is the folks in the very inner circle around him. As I explained to people, we began the first term with senior advisors that included the CEO of ExxonMobil and the president of Goldman Sachs. We ended with a senior advisor who sells pillows at night on Fox News. That's not an exaggeration. That's a real comparison. And I'm worried about his ability to get really good people. There are some good names coming out. You hear Mike Pompeo's name come up again. He's an excellent potential cabinet member. You hear Stephen Mnuchin is showing his face on television again. If he could come back into the government, that would be great. There's some big names in the Republican Senate who might come to work for Donald Trump, and that is fantastic. But I do worry that there's a group around him that is not going to be at the highest level. He needs the best people on that inside, in that inner level, inside the Oval Office. And if he doesn't get that, the presidency could struggle.
Mick, finally, if Donald Trump has the right team, will he be a better president than first time round?
Oh, I think so. I think Trump's greatest weakness and his strength in the first term, Mark, was that he didn't understand Washington, D.C. Again, that was a strength and a weakness. Now he understands Washington, D.C. I know the work that his team has been doing in preparation for the second term to try and fight back against the deep state. When Trump won in 2016, it took everybody by surprise, including him. No one's going to be surprised this time if he wins, and the team will be able to hit the ground running. And I think you'll see a more effective, more efficacious Trump 2.0 than you saw in the first term.
Drew Allen, we heard from Nigel Farage last night. He spoke for 15 to 20 minutes. We also heard from our former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, at CPAC. Is it important that Conservatives across the West unite?
Yes, because what we've discussed more and more is globalism. There is a worldwide effort to reduce civilization to tyrannies and have a ruling elite over everyone. And so, yeah, it's very important that we have world leaders on the same page. I mean, the Argentinian president was here speaking, Milei. I mean, this is an amazing movement that's happening, and people that are on the right side of history, if you will, are unifying over this message and recognizing what we're fighting against, which is the same thing we've always been fighting against, tyranny.
My sincere thanks to Mick Mulvaney, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, top Republican voice in the United States, and Drew Allen, who's the author of America's Last Stand. Will you vote to save or destroy a democracy, America, in 2024? That's right, America's Last Stand, out now. Drew Allen and Mick Mulvaney, thank you for your time. OK, folks, lots more to get through. Next up, abortion at any stage is to be decriminalised in the UK. I'll get reaction from TV star Channel 4's Kim Woodburn. Plus, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking, should Nigel Farage be made the UK's ambassador to the United States? The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Have we got time for a couple of emails? Let me just get to your feedback. mark@gbnews.com. Listen, in my big opinion, there's been a big reaction. I'm concerned that Britain is descending into mob rule. How about this from Marion? Sorry, I can't get that one up. Let's have a look. My goodness. Anarchy. Helen says, Mark, the majority agree with your monologue, but the government is not governing. Blair changed the police force to police service. He opened our borders and forced multiculturalism on us. I didn't vote for him, but was ambushed into accepting it very reluctantly, knowing it would never work. Helen, thank you for that. Keep that feedback coming. Now, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking, should Nigel Farage be made the UK's ambassador to the United States? So we're waiting for the graphic to come up. But Maria, perhaps you've got the result for me, because let me head on to Twitter and see what is happening with that. It's live telly, folks. By the way, I'm very excited at 10 o'clock because it's my take at 10. And I'll be dealing in no uncertain terms with Prince William, who decided to have a very strong opinion about the war in Gaza. And I've got a strong opinion about him. That's a 10, you won't want to miss it. OK, the results are in. So should Nigel Farage be made the UK's ambassador to the United States? The results are in. 68.2% say yes. That's a majority for Nigel. 31.8% say no. Now, the Times newspaper report that Parliament is poised to decriminalise abortion in a historic vote next month, amid a surge in the number of women facing police investigations. Most MPs now take the view that women should no longer be prosecuted if they end pregnancies beyond the 24-week legal time limit. Currently, women can be jailed under the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act if they have an abortion outside of the allotted time. Last year, a mother of 3 was sent to prison for an illegal abortion, and around 100 women have faced police investigations since 2019. So, is it right to legalise abortion altogether at any time? Let's get the views of Channel 4 star TV personality Kim Woodburn. Kim, great to have you back on the show. Do you think this is the right move to completely legalise abortion?
You know, I'll tell you something, Mark. It's a delicate conversation, this, isn't it? So I'm going to be delicate. I don't think you should be allowed, as a woman, your own body, I know there's going to be, to have an abortion when you're 22 or 24 weeks. I think it is far too late. The little soul inside you is well formed. You can even see the sex when they're 3 or 4 months old. If you are pregnant, I think go and see your doctor as early as you can and stress the fact you do not want that child. Then it's up to that doctor to decide what to do. It is not in the hands of a person, a lady, to decide when she's 5 or 6 months pregnant she's going to abort. I find that appalling, and without a doctor saying medically she needs to for her own good, and he's the only one that can do that, I don't think it should be allowed. If you do fall pregnant, I can understand, that you think, oh, God, this is unexpected. I say up to about 2 months. If you feel you need to, then go and get an abortion. If your doctor won't allow it, then what can I say? But no, if you ask me, should this child be as far as advanced as 6 and 7 months? I'm telling you, no. I don't know how she can do it. No.
Kim, fascinating, and I think a very empathetic answer from you. Let's get the views, if we can, Kim, of my top pundits tonight. We've got Chris Wilde, Laura Dodsworth and Diana Moran. Diana Moran, do you think it's right to completely decriminalise abortion at any stage in the pregnancy?
I find this one quite difficult, if I'm honest. I mean, there are circumstances, perhaps there's been rape or some dreadful crime like that that would necessitate an abortion. But, you know, it's a little being. And I find this really, really tricky. earlier on in the pregnancy, maybe it's been found that the fetus isn't as it should be. Perhaps that's a reason for it. But later on, I'm concerned about it. I'm worried about it.
However, Laura Dodsworth, if it's wrong to abort at 20 weeks, why is it right to abort at 4 weeks?
Well, first of all, I just want to clarify what I think might be a misunderstanding among your guests so far, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, but although it will be decriminalised, the rules about abortion don't change. A woman would still have to go to a doctor, 2 doctors, and can only have an abortion if the doctor considers that the risk to her, physically or mentally, is greater than a termination. So all it means is that if a woman has, let's say, a terrible miscarriage or has an abortion after 24 weeks, it won't be a criminal matter. It's a healthcare matter. So it doesn't change the rules about abortion. It just changes how such situations are dealt with after 24 weeks. Also, the limit's already been reduced from 28 to 24 weeks, which is because of the viability of fetuses with modern healthcare. And there are talks to bring that down further to 22 weeks. So I think, actually, if you look at what's really being proposed, we're talking about not sending women to police cells for tragic situations after 24 weeks. And there have been situations where women have been totally innocent. They've had a miscarriage. And we're talking about also reducing the time limit to a lower point to take into account that fetuses can be saved from 22, 23 weeks more than they used to be able to be. So I think there's a slight misunderstanding about what's being proposed here. This is all about compassion for women who've been, even separated from their children after they've been accused of having an abortion when they didn't.
Well, indeed. Now, Laura Dodsworth, Chris Wilde is absolutely right to point out the rules haven't really changed, but the messaging has. Is that significant?
Yes, absolutely. And Laura articulated that really well, and I'm glad you did, because it's one of them subjects I don't know a lot about, and I'm very cautious about being delicate and what my response is. But I want to agree with the panel on this as well. There's lots of things to look at here. It's quite an expansive conversation about young girls who are raped, young girls who are, who are in this precarious situation where they're too young, they fall pregnant, they have to go home and tell their parents. That could be. It could be dreadful for these young people. It's a big conversation, Mark, and it needs to be led by clinical professionals and mental health professionals, and it's not something politicians should be deciding without that kind of expertise.
But it is led by medical professionals.
Yeah, but then if that's the case, then they know better than all politicians and know better than everyone sat on this panel. If they're leading that conversation, we've got to listen to that, but we've got to look at the data, we've got to look at the results and go with whatever professional response is. That's it.
Kim Woodburn, look, I wish we had longer. It's a really busy show tonight, so let's get you on again as soon as we can. A final question about abortion. Is abortion wrong? Is it murder?
Look, there's so many variations, as these people have said here. I mean, abortion, if a doctor feels that the lady in question needs an abortion, he has medical reasons, whether she would die giving birth or the baby is severely crippled and deformed, of course abortion is the right way. There are so many variations, but I don't think any woman who knows she's carrying a healthy baby, now I don't mean if she's been raped, who wants that baby? And I totally agree with the three of you. Let us say she can see through a boyfriend normally, and she carries that baby 5 or 6 months and then decides to abort it. She needs to go to prison. She needs to go to prison. She's known all those weeks she's having that little one. The tinier it is, go to the doctor, tell him, and he will sort it out if he feels that mentally you can't cope. But it's here for you can feel that little soul in your tummy. You can see your tummy growing, and you abort that child illegally. Jail, my love, and throw away the flaming key.
I tell you what, not mincing her words, never sat on a fence in her life. My thanks to Kim Woodburn. Kim, we'll catch up soon. Love to your hubby as well. We look forward to your return to the programme. Coming up in... Oh, there you go, honoured. In just 15 minutes' time, in My Take at 10, Prince William has made a huge mistake by commenting on the war in Gaza. He should stick to opening hospitals and kissing babies. I'll be dealing with our next king in 15 minutes' time. But first, my Mark Meets guest is the author of best-selling biographies of Ken Dodd and Larry Grayson. This is a guy that wrote for the two Ronnies as well. We'll talk about top comedy legends next.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, you know, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you were right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
And
are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid,
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, you know, the profits... I think on Clarkins Farm, I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something.
Right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I'm all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way
the
instead.
Tata Steel thing.
Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, you know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you
it
say
can't
you
get any more
support some of
obvious.
these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the
like
message.
any of them.
But I do appreciate the
any of
message.
them.
Yeah, but sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's time now for Mark Meets. And tonight, a legendary television writer and producer who's penned gags for The Two Ronnies, among many others. Tony Nicholson is the author of best-selling autobiographies of Ken Dodd. That brilliant book is called The Squire of Notty-Ash and His Lady. Larry Grayson, Shut That Door, the definitive biography. Also, his popular book, Great British TV Quiz Shows, with a foreword by Chris Tarrant, no less. And his debut novel is out now, A New Messiah, all of which are available to buy from gnbooks.co.uk. Tony Nicholson, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, that's great to have you on the programme. We know, Tony, that Ken Dodd was a comic genius, famous for his shows that ran for hours on end. But what did you learn about the guy himself in writing the book?
Well, I was a massive fan of his from being a child. And I'd been to see loads of those 5-hour marathons. I mean, sometimes longer. And I loved them. And I loved him. And I got to work with him in the 80s. And so I got to know him a little bit. And there's been books written about him before, but he was always a very private person. And nobody really got under his skin, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And when he died, I did a documentary with his widow, Anne, and she and I got on well. And I said, why don't we write a book about Ken? And she gave it some thought. And so she's given me the full story that nobody else has ever heard before.
Was he a happy man? Did he have a happy life?
He did, actually. So, yeah, I mean, because a lot of comedians don't, but I think he was extremely content. He was a very religious man, which I discovered and wasn't aware of. So he tended to do, he wouldn't do dark humor, he wouldn't do satire, he didn't believe in cruel humor. Yeah, he was extremely contented because he was successful and he loved, I mean, he wrote notebooks like diaries all his life, and in one of them, he just for his own benefit, not to be conceited, he wrote, "I love being Ken Dodd," which I thought was lovely.
Isn't that wonderful? Look, he was an amazing joke writer, a fabulous comedic performer, and an excellent singer as well, quite the crooner. He released hit records. But how devastating, Tony, was his trial and ultimate conviction for tax evasion?
He wasn't convicted. No.
What, did he settle out of court? What happened? Yeah, what happened?
No, he was without any charges sticking whatsoever.
Is that right?
No, he was totally exonerated.
Oh, OK. Well, I stand corrected.
It was a trial by jury. Sorry, say again.
Yes, I stand corrected. You'll have to forgive me. Of course, he made jokes about it forever after, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, he did. Yeah, it gave him another 20 minutes of the act. So, yeah, but it was devastating for him at the time, obviously, you know, because it was a difficult time. I go into it in the book with great detail because Anne, his wife, was able to tell me what it was like to be in the eye of the storm.
Listen, I'm so glad you corrected it. I think I'm mixing him up with Lester Piggott, of course, a very different.
Yes, no, he went to jail.
And he went to jail. Now, he was an incredible artist. Larry Grayson is another subject of one of your best-selling biographies. He was one of the country's best-loved entertainers. Why was he so popular, do you think, Tony?
That's a good question, because he didn't really do jokes, if you think about it. His material was just him. It was just this flight of fancy. He was an incredible performer, and he'd been working professionally since he was 14. He'd never done anything else. So he knew how to perform, and he knew how to handle an audience. And I think there was a sort of camp culture around at that time. There was Dick Emery and Kenny Everett was doing quite camp things, Kenneth Williams. So, and I think we just took him to our hearts. You know, he was a breath of fresh air, really.
As were the two Ronnies. Tell me about your time writing for those legends, Tony, among others, of course.
Well, yes, they were the first people I ever got a check from, if you like. You know, I'd been trying to write professionally for a while. And the first jokes I ever sold were to the two Ronnies news desks that they used to do at the beginning and end of the show. And so that was, what a start. And of course, I got invited down to the television centre to see a show being rehearsed and recorded. That was my first time in a television studio. The two Ronnies, it was amazing.
What's your appraisal, Tony, of modern comedy? Do you like it?
Yes, I mean, the truth is I'm getting old now, and my son is a real genius on modern comedy. I'm more old school, I like the Morecambe and Wise's. Yeah. And there was edgy stuff around in those days as well, don't forget. There was Peter Cook, there was David Frost and John Cleese doing the Frost Report. There was still edgy stuff around in those days. There's a bit of a myth that it was all sort of broad comedy in those days.
I know your first novel is out, your debut novel. I'm going to grab a copy of that. I've only got a couple of seconds left, Tony. You've written a book about TV quiz shows with a contribution from Chris Tarrant. Briefly, if you can, what makes for a good TV quiz?
I think, because basically it's just somebody asking a question and somebody else giving an answer. But I think we like to see Jeopardy. I think we like to play along at home. There's nothing better than showing off if you know the answer and shouting it out before the contestant does and showing off to the other people in the room.
Tony,
so I think we love all that.
I could talk to you all night, but look, thank you so much. Your biographies of Larry Grayson and Ken Dodd, the TV quiz show book and the novel are out now. Go to gnbooks.co.uk. Next up, I'll be dealing with Prince William in no uncertain times. Find out why shortly.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Greg Dewhurst. We'll see some frost and fog forming through tonight, but we do have some heavy rain moving into southern parts of England and Wales as we go through Sunday and into Monday, courtesy of this area of low pressure. Met Office warnings already out for this part of the world through into Monday morning. This evening, though, plenty of dry weather across the UK, some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to fall away overnight below freezing, -7 or 8 across the glens of Scotland. Some mist and fog patches forming, but by the end of the night, cloud and rain pushing into southwest England. So wet start here to Sunday morning elsewhere. A grey start in places, some mist and fog patches. But once these clear, there'll be plenty of sunny spells, particularly across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Cloudier generally for the rest of England. Wales, with this rain slowly pushing its way eastwards across southern counties, turning heavy at times. Some localised flooding is possible. For most temperatures near average, 7 to 9 Celsius, 10 or 11, but the strength of the wind just making it feel colder here. For Monday, early rain across the southeast, some uncertainty how quickly this will clear away, but for many after a chilly start, it will be a fine day, plenty of sunny spells, just a few showers, but quite a keen east-northeasterly breeze, particularly in the east. Over the next few days, it stays unsettled with further spells of rain, temperatures generally near or a little above average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting.
Yeah.
And that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, Prince William has made a huge mistake by commenting on the war in Gaza. He should stick to opening hospitals and kissing babies. King Charles reduced to tears by public support following his cancer diagnosis, and rumours of a woke divorce for Harry and Meghan. The Queen of US Royal Reporting Kinsey Schofield brings reaction. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits, including the Green Goddess herself, Diana Moran. A packed show, lots to get through. I'll be dealing with Prince William in no uncertain terms, straight after the news headlines and Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The UK has reaffirmed its commitment to Ukraine as the country's war with Russia enters its third year. £245 million has been promised to boost critical stockpiles of ammunition. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says he's proud that since the invasion, the UK has trained 60,000 Ukrainian troops, adding that no one has done as much for Kyiv than the UK. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been in Kyiv. He's been speaking exclusively to GB News, praising the war-torn country.
They've taken out thousands and thousands of Russian tanks, 40% of Russia's Black Sea fleet, and yet Ukraine's exports are now back up to pre-war levels. So I've got absolutely no doubt that with the right support from the West, Ukraine can win. And it's vital in the months ahead that we give them that support. This is an unconventional report, but here we are in Kyiv on the sad second anniversary with a Ukrainian population that, in my view, is absolutely determined still to win, and they're going to win.
Meanwhile, the King and Queen have praised Ukrainians for their true valour. King Charles also says he's greatly encouraged by the efforts of the UK and its allies in supporting Kyiv at a time of suffering and need. The monarch was paying his respects at a Ukrainian cathedral in central London, where crowds later gathered to show their support for the country and its people. Commemorations began with an interfaith prayer, and similar services have been held across the UK. In other news, Lee Anderson has been suspended from the Tory party. That comes after the former deputy chair said the London mayor had given the capital away and was controlled by Islamists. The Prime Minister was under pressure to react after Sadiq Khan said his deafening silence was condoning racism. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's now weighed in, saying Rishi Sunak's weakness means that Tory MPs can act with impunity. A spokesperson for the party's chief whip says the MP was suspended for refusing to apologise for his comments. Well, in a statement, Anderson said, "I fully accept they had no option but to suspend the whip in these circumstances. However, I'll continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia." The body of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been handed over to his mother. He unexpectedly died in prison 9 days ago. His death certificate suggests that it was of natural causes. Well, his spokeswoman says it's still not clear whether authorities will allow relatives to hold a funeral the way his family wants and the way he deserves. And thousands of cards of support have been sent to King Charles following his cancer diagnosis. The monarch laughed as he read one of them, which had a disgruntled dog on the front of it, saying at least you don't have to wear a cone. Around 7,000 cards have been sent from around the world, offering good wishes, with one child writing, "Never give up, be brave, don't push your limits." Others shared their own experiences of cancer, urging the King to stay positive. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Mark.
My thanks to Tatiana Sanchez. Isn't it great having her with us on a Saturday night? Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. King Charles, as you've just heard, reduced to tears by public support following his cancer diagnosis, and rumours of a work divorce for Harry and Meghan. What's going on? The Queen of US Royal Reporting, Kinsey Schofield, brings reaction. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. Journalist and model Diana Moran, that's right, the Green Goddess herself, tonight in baby blue. The fabulous Laura Dodsworth, author and commentator, and campaigner and writer, the brilliant Chris Wilde. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros, a packed hour, and those papers are coming. But first, I've got to deal with the next king in my Take at 10. Good evening. The halo has slipped for Prince William, or should I say, the crown. The King's eldest son and heir to the throne has rightly won plaudits for his dignity and stoicism in the face of endless attacks on his family and the monarchy from his younger brother Harry. But this week I read with utter shock and astonishment a statement, no less, from our next king about the conflict in Gaza, calling for an end to the fighting. Now, who wouldn't agree that the carnage in the Middle East is a catastrophic disaster and a devastating tragedy? But how arrogant and high-minded of Prince William, a rich and privileged aristocrat whose platform was earned by accident of birth, to cast himself as some kind of peace envoy and international statesman. It demonstrates a hubris and naivety that would have even his uncle, Prince Andrew, blushing. I'm sorry, but who do these people think they are? There may well be a case for an immediate end to the fighting, who knows, but a senior member of the British royal family should not be making it. How will his statement be received in Israel, where Jewish people suffered their worst single day of slaughter since the Holocaust, and where over 130 hostages, including women, children and the elderly, remain captive? It might not be his intention, but how will Jewish people living in this country feel to see their Prince of Wales offering what could be perceived as succour to a terrorist outfit in Hamas, who would surely only welcome his latest comments? For Israel to drop arms is their plan. In his rather flowery statement, Prince William does his best Winston Churchill impression by saying, even in the darkest hour, we must not succumb to the counsel of despair. I'll be honest, the only thing he's got in common with Winston Churchill is a lack of hair. And in the statement, he makes it all about himself. He says, I continue to cling to the hope that a brighter future can be found, and I refuse to give up on that. Well, that's nice for you. That last refrain has a flavour of global leadership about it, with William pitching himself as some kind of international diplomat and dignitary. This follows a rambling speech at the Queen's Jubilee celebrations in 2022, in which he clearly presented himself as an ambassador for net zero. I'm sorry, William, but if you want that sort of role, you're going to have to ask somebody to elect you. Given that you are part of an arcane institution where your surname bestowed upon you privileged position, that you're going to have to stay out of these matters. That's right, you were born into privilege, you're not elected. Being born in the right womb is not a qualification for a role in international affairs. Yes, he condemned the violence on both sides, addressed the scourge of anti-Semitism and called for the hostages to be released. But the broader message of an end to the fighting calls into question Israel's right to self-defence and its stated military aim of wiping out Hamas, who, let's not forget, are no better than the Nazis. That's why this is such dangerous territory for a senior royal. It's my view that Prince William should stick to opening hospital wings and kissing babies. If he wants to get political, he can kiss off. I like Prince William, but I think he's crossed a line. What's your view? mark@gbnews.com. I'll get to your email shortly, but first, my top pundits, journalist and model Diana Moran, author and commentator Laura Dodsworth, and campaigner and writer Chris Wilde. Can I ask you, Diana Moran, your reaction to this intervention by Prince William, the Prince of Wales?
I do think that he's made a mistake. I think he's crossed the line. I don't think royals should be saying the sort of things that he's saying. I know there are good intentions, but he is not the government. I don't think he should have been saying anything like this at all. I think his grandmother would have been very concerned to have heard him interfering with it.
Yes, I don't remember, Chris Wilde, the Queen commenting on any wars.
Well, I'm sorry, you know, I love the Queen, but she's not here anymore. And I think Princess Diana would have said a lot about this. And he's in his rights as a senior royal to speak about the war. Of course he is. He is a diplomat, Mark, so I disagree with what you've just said there. For the first time, I disagree with you. He's the perfect person to speak up right now because his voice is powerful. And what's going on over there, you know, everybody needs to be having an opinion. If anybody's voice can resonate a chord, it's his. So I think he's in his rights to say as much as he can, as a royalist, as a human being, as a father, yes, speak up, speak out, do what you need to do.
Laura Dodsworth, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, simply wants an end to the fighting, an end to the carnage. What's not to like?
Well, we know all about what he wants because he managed to use a lot of I's in that letter, didn't he? It was very egocentric. Even the very last line of the refrain, I refuse to give up on that. So I'm not sure he's the perfect person to have done this at all for all the reasons you set out. But I'd go a bit further. I said I think really there's a feeling that he's probably being co-opted a little bit, potentially by the government.
He's a human being.
Or the hang on, let me finish. Potentially co-opted a little bit by the government or the Foreign Office, because it's a bit strange, isn't it, that he comes out with this in the week that Rishi Sunak's language is hardening up a little bit. So I'm not sure he's done this on his own. After all, where's his statement about the 1 to 2 million Uyghurs who've been forcibly detained in China? I mean, I missed that one. I missed that. I also don't really like this Churchillian reference. I think it should really be beneath him to have done this.
He hasn't earned it. Laura, he hasn't earned the right to use Churchill's language, has he?
He hasn't earned it. But also, Churchill would have said, in this darkest hour, I know, let's nearly finish the job and then let's stop. You know, you talked about Israel's aims. What we have here is a situation where neither side wants a ceasefire. Hamas has said, literally said, it will do it again and again and again, and its founding charter calls for the annihilation of the State of Israel and the death of all Jews. Let's not forget that is their charter. And Israel wants the surrender and the demilitarisation of Hamas, a terrorist organisation, and the return of the hostages. So I think that Prince William's really made a misstep with this before he's even king. I think it's a great pity because lots of us really have high hopes for this generation of royalty, and he's overstepped his line here.
Chris Wilde, you're shaking your head. You don't look happy.
No, I don't. I think, first and foremost, regardless of his position, he's a human being, he's a father. You know, anybody in that position, how could they just stay silent about what's happening over there at the moment? Yes, you can't have a biased opinion, but you can have an opinion, you can have a voice, and that's what he's doing. I don't want the head of the royal family sitting at home in their privileges, not doing anything. I want them to speak up. I want them to be leaders, and he is showing pure leadership by speaking up. Because let's face it, these politicians we've got at the moment, they're useless. So if the royal family can do something and their voice can resonate a chord, so be it.
Chris Wilde, I understand your point of view, and we all want the war to stop. Of course we do, and the carnage. It's devastating what's happening in Gaza. But what would you say to a Jewish person watching this programme who feels offended by that intervention, or indeed someone in Israel following the October the 7th attacks? What would you say to them?
Mark, my opinion on this, war is war. I don't want to see war. I want to see peace. I don't want to see children dying every day. But what I would say to anybody is that, listen, if anybody has a powerful voice and if anybody can speak and with that voice prevent any more killings, then yes, so be it. I think you're picking at straws here. You really are. You really are.
Fair enough. Diana Moran, you get the last word.
Well, I think it's putting the royal family at jeopardy. And at this particular moment in our history, it's all a bit dicey anyhow, and I don't think this has helped.
Now, let me tell you that my brilliant pundits return at exactly 10:30 sharp for tomorrow's papers. And at 10:45, we have an exclusive interview featuring the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the 2-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. That's right, Boris Johnson before the end of the show. But next up, King Charles reduced to tears by public support following his cancer diagnosis and rumours of a work divorce for Harry and Meghan. The Queen of US Royal Reporting Kinsey Schofield brings reaction. Lots to get through, don't go anywhere.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Well, a big reaction to my take at 10. I think that Prince William has crossed a line by commenting on the war in Gaza. Many of you don't agree with me. Mark at gbnews.com. Mark, you have crossed the line, not Prince William, says Stephen. How about this from Hugh? Mark, you are completely out of order. Prince William giving a balanced statement. He cannot just say nothing, which is impacting life in the UK. Noel says, hi, Mark. I note your rather mean-spirited comments on William's stance on Gaza, which will have been approved by the government. Let's have a look. One more, if I've got time. Mark, so your guest, your pundit, Chris Wilde, thinks it's OK for Prince William to make a statement on Israel. What about when it's about a subject that he doesn't agree with? Also, Prince William is not a leader. He is a figurehead. Listen, keep those opinions coming. Mark Dolan tonight is the home of diverse opinion. This is a show where everybody disagrees with the presenter, and that's just how I like it. OK, lots to get through. It's time for US News now with the Queen of American showbiz, royal and political reporting, someone I always agree with. It's Kinsey Schofield. Hi, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. Good to hear your voice and see you.
Tell me about the Sussexes' work divorce.
Well, first of all, I would just like to congratulate the Sun on catching up with me, because I've been saying this for over a year, that we would see Meghan branch out and try to brand herself to prove that she's something beyond a prince's wife. And we saw a lot of that this week here in Los Angeles. 2 sightings of Meghan Markle actually on Thursday. One was Thursday afternoon when she was at an Italian restaurant in the heart of Beverly Hills, lunching with the same designer of her Givenchy wedding dress. And then that evening, we saw her, after a costume change, of course, dining with some of Oprah Winfrey's producers, likely trying to talk about future projects. She's got her Netflix deal, which expires in 2025. But we are seeing Harry and Meghan kind of go in different directions. But Meghan, we do see her show up to support Prince Harry when it comes to Invictus. And then every once in a while, you kind of see Prince Harry insert himself in some of Meghan's projects. Like, it was his idea for her to have a male-dominated podcast episode of Archetypes.
Kinsey, what drives their relationship? Is it love or is it business?
I think that they are crazy in love with each other, but I also think that they have isolated and alienated themselves from everyone that they've ever known, really, that it kind of clinging to each other, because who do they have left? But I do think that they do love each other. They are driven by money, because that's what they need to survive. And, we're seeing a lot of them leaning on that royal brand while trying to pretend like they're not.
Tell us, who is Martha Stewart, and why might Meghan Markle be the new Martha Stewart?
Isn't this such a strange story? Meghan Markle wants to be the new Martha Stewart, the one that was in the Slammer, the one that Martha Stewart from the Slammer. I think that this is just, honestly, they've just replaced the name Gwyneth Paltrow with Martha Stewart. And I agree with this story, because if you look at what Meghan developed herself through the TIG, it was a lifestyle brand. Years ago, or at least 6 months ago, this story was circulating that Meghan Markle wanted to be the new Gwyneth Paltrow. And now we're saying, Page 6 is reporting Meghan Markle wants to be the new Martha Stewart. What that is, in general, is somebody that is a mainstream influencer. She wants to have a cooking show, a cookbook. She wants you to be able to go to a Tesco and find pots and pans with her face on it. I do believe that this is the direction that Meghan and William Morris Endeavor are trying to create. I think they're trying to create a path for Meghan in this environment of being a lifestyle expert.
Well, that's right, because, of course, Martha Stewart was the queen of lifestyle advice, wasn't she? She had massive shows in the 80s and 90s, and she had cookbooks, and there was crockery and all sorts of...
Now she's best friends with Snoop Dogg, which I can applaud that. That shows that an ability to go in crazy places. So God bless Martha Stewart.
Yes, indeed. She's been on quite the journey. How would you appraise Meghan Markle's popularity in the United States at the moment?
I don't think it looks good for Meghan to be thrusting herself into the limelight in the midst of the King and Princess of Wales's health concerns. I think it looks a little vapid and shallow for her to be hobnobbing around Beverly Hills.
Perish the thought.
In the midst of some of these very serious issues. But they really lack self-awareness. That's something that we've seen throughout the last several years. I think that she doesn't believe that their health concerns are her concern, and she's moving forward.
Of course, she would challenge those views and argue that she's very worried about the health of her family members, but you're entitled to your view, Kinsey. You mentioned the King, reduced to tears as a result of the outpouring of public support following his cancer diagnosis.
That's right. This is just kind of a comment that he made to Rishi Sunak about how moved he was. And I actually, if anyone's interested in writing the King, I put the address on my Instagram because I did. It was important to me to reach out to him and tell him how devastated I was by the news. It really shocked all of us. I think that he is such a sensitive soul. And he is a sweet man. And if you can reach out to him, please do let him know that you're thinking about him, if that's the way you feel, because I think it's lifted his spirits quite a bit.
Well, most definitely. We wish him well. Let me tell you that I wrote to him, Kinsey. I wrote to the King, and he loves the show.
I know he does. I'm sure that, he actually really does love to watch and listen to radio and news. So whenever I'm there, I'm always like, I wonder if the King just saw me on.
Now, I've got the letter somewhere, and it says, one watches GB News and Mark Dolan tonight. So very, very flattered. Listen, let's talk about the King of GB News, Nigel Farage. He's been in the United States, Kinsey, at CPAC, which is a kind of a conference for people on the political right in the United States, Republican supporters. He made quite a splash. Are people starting to get familiar with who Nigel Farage is now in America?
No, absolutely. We love Nigel Farage here. I think that he is become a bigger personality thanks to his association with Donald Trump. CPAC is obviously the perfect venue for him. This is where conservatives, Republicans come together and they determine what direction they're headed in the future. They want to spotlight some of the political leaders. And, Nigel is a great, reasonable, common sense voice who does definitely stand behind the former president, Donald Trump. And he's got great stories about where he comes from and what's going on your side of the pond and how we can avoid seeing some of those same things come over here.
Well, indeed. And interestingly, a majority of my viewers on Mark Dolan tonight have voted in our poll saying that they think that Nigel Farage should be the next UK ambassador to the United States. That would be a great platform for Mr. Farage, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think that he would wear that title with flying colors.
Most definitely. Listen, you've delivered, as always, with flying colours tonight, Kinsey. We'll catch you in a week's time. Do check out Kinsey's brilliant website, To Die For Daily, and her podcast of the same name. Lots more to get through, though. Tomorrow's front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. Plus, Mark Dolan tonight has an exclusive interview with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the second anniversary of the war in Ukraine. All of that's coming, but the papers are next. See you in 2.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
An interview with Boris Johnson coming up in a couple of minutes, but first, tomorrow's front pages. And well done to Mescana for getting those papers out so fast, doing a brilliant job today, just like Josh, Maria and Nicola. Bodyguards for MPs as extremism threat rises. BBC proud to be progressive, says Boss. The BBC's Director General told staff that the corporation should be proud to be progressive. In a leaked recording, Tim Davies said the BBC walked a joyous tightrope of the culture wars and said being progressive was something staff should be proud of. Army at risk of becoming static land force, Chief tells generals. And Farage woos Lee Anderson after Tory sacked over Khan comments. OK, the Mail on Sunday next. Starmer's deputy used Maggie's flagship policy to buy discounted home, but now she threatens to cut the subsidy for others. Hypocrite Rayner's 48k profit on council house sale. This is an exclusive by Glenn Owen at the Mail on Sunday. Angela Rayner has been accused of hypocrisy after it was discovered she made a £48,000 profit on her ex-council house thanks to the right-to-buy policy that she now wants to reform. Also, Showbiz exclusive. Just before we get to that, Josh, you'll like this. Showbiz exclusive, a date for your diary, Bridget Jones movie number 4. That's good news we could do with the giggle, couldn't we? Let's hope it's not a woke reboot. Not another one.
Yeah. What's she going to look like in this one?
Exactly. The Observer, Islamophobia. Starmer turns on Tories over toxic rhetoric. And car makers ignored keyless thefts warning. The car industry ignored warnings more than a decade ago that the latest keyless technology on modern vehicles risked a surge in car thefts. That according to an Observer investigation. 2 years of resistance in Ukraine. Thank you, is the headline in the Observer. That's a photograph there on the front page. Independent. Khan condemns morally rotten Tories for days of silence over Lee Anderson's rant. They're calling it a racist rant. Revealed energy giants make £1 billion profit every week. Staggering sums earned worldwide by gas giants Shell, BP, ExxonMobil and Equinor as millions of Britons struggle to heat their homes and pay their bills. Sunday Times revealed the drink and drugs spiking epidemic sweeping Britain and bodyguards for 3 female MPs as safety fears rise. Send frozen Russian cash to Kiev, says Rishi Sunak on the 2-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. And last but not least, the Daily Star Sunday, ecclesiastical chaos. You're the devil in disguise. Sick fraudsters have conned nuns out of a small fortune by using AI to pose as bishops begging for cash to fund operations.
Wow.
Well, we got the Mirror as well. Let's have a look at the Mirror. Sunday Mirror. Kylie, I have lived and learned on love. Do enjoy a Kylie Minogue tune.
Yeah.
Do you, Diana Moran?
Yes, of course I do.
I'm spinning around. Let's not lose any listeners or viewers. Row over anti-Muslim rant. Boot out this bigot, says the mayor. This is my words. No, these are not my words. It's Sunday Mirror's words, not mine. Loudmouth Lee Anderson was suspended by the Tories today as politicians on both sides called for his expulsion in extraordinary scenes. Mr Anderson refused to apologise for accusing London Mayor Sadiq Khan of being controlled by Islamists in a television rant on this very channel. OK, well, those are your front pages.
I saw it.
And let me tell you that you're watching a presenter that's got a pair of balls on him, which means we're going to talk about this story. That's right. We're going to talk about Lee Anderson. Did he go too far? Is it right that Rishi Sunak has suspended the whip, which means he's now a sitting independent? He's not a Conservative MP at the moment. Your reaction, Mark at gbnews.com. Did he go too far? in his comments. We've got a statement from Mr. Anderson, Lee Anderson, very shortly. By the way, a good friend of mine. But let's get reaction from my pundits. First of all, Chris Wilde, do you think Lee Anderson went too far?
Yes, Mark, I do. And apologies if he's a friend of yours. But again, it's just those positions of power. You've got to be very careful what you say. And saying stuff like that, it's just...
Hang on, you didn't say that about the Prince of Wales.
But he's not, he's not calling someone out and calling them saying, but they're this and that. He's got a big mouth. He's in a position of power. He went too far. He's been suspended, and rightly so.
OK. Lynn, what do you think about this? Would you agree or disagree, Laura?
He didn't say Muslims, he said Islamists. He's talking about radical Islamists. I think, actually, people that are confusing it and saying that he's being Islamophobic are the ones being racist. He didn't say all Muslims like that. He's talking about radical Islamists. And what's more, I think he's speaking for a lot of people. Excuse me for mixing my metaphors, but he's becoming a scapegoat for the elephant in the room that people just aren't talking about. Look, we've got MPs who need bodyguards.
Yeah.
We've got Islamists who said they wanted to lock down Westminster during the Opposition Day movement. He's just calling it out.
So what's your verdict on Rishi Sunak's decision to sling him out of the party, to take the whip off him?
I think it's capitulation to the wrong group of people.
Diana Moran, has Lee Anderson been thrown under the bus, or has he brought this on himself?
I think he's been thrown under the bus. I agree with an awful lot of what he said. It's probably the extreme way that he said it.
I mean, is that an issue? Is it just the wording of what Lee Anderson had to say, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Chris?
Yeah. Listen, you've just made a good point there, all right? I'll agree with you with that. It's the way he said it. I personally think it was egregious. He should have thought about this before he even spouted it out, knowing it would cause him loads of trouble. Again, it's just these politicians. It's a delay tactic. It's a dog whistle for the Conservatives. I think they just know the end is near, and he's not helping, is he?
Listen, let's have a look at what exactly was said. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, accused the Prime Minister of being complicit in racism for failing to condemn Mr Anderson's comments that pour fuel on the fire of anti-Muslim hatred. He said the claim was Islamophobic and sent the message that Muslims were fair game when it came to racism. Does he have a point about this very delicate national conversation we're having between different cultures, Diana Moran?
He may have a point. It is such a delicate situation.
Grant Shapps has distanced himself from Mr Anderson's comments. Business Minister Nus Ghani described her Tory colleague's comments as foolish and dangerous.
And he's a smart guy.
Foolish and dangerous, Laura Dodsworth?
No, I think he says things in a really kind of what's the word? He's quite extravagant in his... No, he's quite extravagant in his language, but the point he's making is one that is bearing fruit right now. As I said, we have MPs with bodyguards, and the risk what they're at risk from is Islamist extremists, and that's what Lee Anderson was talking about and calling out. He wasn't talking about all Muslims. So to say that he's guilty of stirring up anti-Muslim sentiment is not accurate. That's not what he said.
So actually, let's have a little look at what he said before I get to his response. He said, I don't actually believe that the Islamists have got control of our country, but what I do believe is they've got control of Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, and they've got control of London. He said that Sadiq Khan had given our capital city away to his mates. I mean, he's really sticking his neck out about Mayor Khan there, isn't he?
He is. I mean, OK, it's definitely incendiary towards Sadiq Khan, but look at the streets of London on Saturdays, which a majority of Jews say are now a no-go zone for them. Does this not matter?
Do you think children going to school, the Jewish children?
Yeah.
Jewish children are afraid to go to school in anything religious. I've got guests that will only come on this show in a taxi, which I think is very telling. Diana Moran, do you think that Lee Anderson should have kept the Conservative whip then? Should he still be a Conservative MP?
I would like him to be, but I can see the argument that perhaps he shouldn't.
Mark, also, just bear in mind, if it's me and you on TV or radio who said that, we would lose our jobs too. Because you've got to think about, you know, your position, how powerful that your position is when you say stuff like that. Of course he's going to lose his job, and he probably knows that as well, but again...
What about freedom of speech?
But Mark, freedom of speech, what? These are politicians. Once you sign that contract, once you get that job, you know this thing about freedom of speech doesn't really exist to people like you. You've got to try and keep the peace.
Do you take Laura's point, though, that he was referencing Islamists, which is a term... an Islamist refers to an Islamic extremist, somebody that supports Hamas, for example.
Yes, Mark, but then again, I agree with you. It's how he said it. It's how he delivered the speech.
Well, I'm just going to gently point out a slight double standard here.
No, it's not.
Forgive
I know where you're going to go with
But
this.
you know, you're saying that people shouldn't say things that are beyond their role, which is exactly what the Prince of Wales has done about a highly contentious political situation. So you see, you like it when it suits your own beliefs, but not if it doesn't.
A political debate about this at all. I'm not. It's a completely different statement. It's a completely different statement.
Indeed. I think I've got a statement here. Yes, it is. Here it comes. Well done, Maria. So Lee Anderson, who is, of course, a Conservative MP, but now an independent, having lost the Tory whip, and he's a presenter on GB News, said... Following a call with the Chief Whip, I understand the difficult position that I've put both he and the Prime Minister in with regards to my comments. I fully accept that they had no option but to suspend the whip in these circumstances. However, I will continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. Its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. OK, just repeating myself there. But look, there is the statement from Lee Anderson. Laura, is there any sanction that should be meted out to Lee Anderson, do you think?
I don't know. Look, I'm really not a political animal. I don't know about the ins and outs of how you discipline MPs for saying the wrong thing or not the wrong thing. I just think what he said actually wasn't, while it was very critical of Sadiq Khan, he was talking about Islamists. You know, you read that last line twice by mistake, but it bears repeating, because anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are not equivalent. One is a hatred of Jews and one is criticism of a religion. And it's interesting how they're always put next to each other, like they're the same thing.
Not comparable. Sunday Telegraph, Nigel Farage woos Lee Anderson after Tory sacked over Khan comments. Does this increase the chances, Diana Moran, of Lee Anderson defecting to Reform UK?
Ooh. It could well be.
Because he hasn't got a party at the moment.
Exactly. And we all know that, you know, there's Labour, there's Conservative, and coming up fast and furiously...
I'm not sure the Lib Dems would have him.
Reform.
I think he'd have to identify as a woman to get into the Lib Dems.
Better than Ed Davey.
Yes. But what do you think about it? That's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because he is... The bottom line with Lee Anderson is he hasn't got a party at the moment, Laura Dodsworth, but he has got a following.
Yes, he has.
So he could take that popularity elsewhere.
He has got a following, and the reason is that he talks a lot of common sense that people gravitate to. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but people follow him because they like what he has to say.
Yeah, most
They like what he has to say a lot more than they like what Sunak has to say.
I mean, it would be a feather in the cap for Reform UK to sign him up, wouldn't it? Notwithstanding your differences with Lee Anderson, but Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, it would be like Christmas coming early, wouldn't it, if Lee Anderson joined them?
Well, it definitely would, I guess, for some people, but not for me, Mark.
Do you not feel that Lee Anderson speaks for millions of ordinary working Brits?
Well, it doesn't speak for me. No, it doesn't speak for me at all.
Diana, you think he does?
I think he does.
Listen, you know, there was a time when he spoke about people in care and about homelessness. He's got this thing about personal opinions, but it doesn't speak for me. It doesn't speak for the working class people of this country. And you know, for me, he's lost his job. He's independent now, and he deserves to be there.
Chris Wilde, by the way, what about this story in the Observer? Car makers ignore keyless thefts warning. We could have told them 10 years ago that those automatic keys were an accident waiting to happen.
Of course it's going to happen, isn't it?
It's ridiculous.
Well, it's easier for car thieves now, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's Range Rovers. I think it's £10,000 to insure a Range Rover in some cities.
Not for a Peugeot 306, Mark.
Is that what you're driving?
That's right, I drive, yeah.
Listen, you shouldn't name the car. You'll be a target. You'll be a marked man. Lee Anderson fans will be after you.
Now, thanks to you guys.
This is, I mean, it's an example, isn't it, Diana Moran, of technology that we don't need.
Exactly.
It's backfired horribly.
Yes. I mean, we were doing very well with our car industry before.
Yes.
Incidentally, talking about all these electric cars and the likes of, I love cats, and cats are always wandering around all over the place. So many of these cars, there's a cat fast asleep under a car, by a wheel, and the car starts, there's no noise.
That's right.
And there's a disaster.
Well, most definitely, most definitely. We'll look at lots more stories to get through. Let me tell you, my pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. Also revealed energy giants make £1 billion profit every week. Is that justified? Should we tax them more? Also, the drink and drugs spiking epidemic that's sweeping Britain. So much more to get through. And an exclusive interview with the former PM, Boris Johnson, no less. All of that is next.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
Comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have 2 SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had 2 brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you could run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
Yeah, the growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have,
exactly.
the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Did you like that? We've been working on that trick all day. I'm the new David Copperfield, that's right. The case of the disappearing presenter. Wishful thinking. OK, Josh, do we have the Express or should we come to it shortly? OK, well, look, let's talk about dad bods. It's one of the big stories of the day. The Mail newspaper have got an exclusive. Do women really love a dad bod? They analysed research on the type of male physique most desirable to women. A lot of women like the sculpted male. They like their abs, but they're not looking for Cristiano Ronaldo. And interestingly, Laura Dodsworth, they're suggesting that a slightly overweight man implies reliability and kindness. Would you agree?
Oh, are they suggesting that indeed? Was this a male journalist? Do you know what I found so funny about this article? It's how long it is, how much space was given to justifying men getting out of shape. And I struggled to remember when an article had been written justifying women getting a little bit fat that took up so much space in a national newspaper, and I couldn't think of one.
It's an absolute outrage, isn't it? What do you think, though? You've just got married, haven't you?
I'm getting getting
Getting married. Well, I'll be honest, I've seen your other half naked and he's got abs. So you don't know anything about the dad bod, do you?
I love it.
What do you think, dad bod, yes or no, Diana Moran?
I'm not in the least bit interested about the dad bod. I want to know about the brain. That's what attracts
and chemistry.
me.
It's about chemistry in the room with somebody.
The brain and chemistry, that's where Chris Wilde comes in. Speaking of dad bods, the former PM Boris Johnson has visited the war-torn nation of Ukraine to mark the second anniversary of Russia's invasion. Boris Johnson spoke exclusively to GB News. Let's take a listen. He was in conversation with the former Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, where he reiterated Ukraine's determination to win the war.
Hi, folks. I'm here on the second anniversary of Vladimir Putin's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. I'm here in Kyiv, where, in spite of everything, those gallant, heroic Ukrainians are fighting on. And I've got absolutely no doubt that they are going to win. And I think that with the support of the West, provided we do the right thing, give them the right support militarily, politically, and economically, the courage of Ukrainians, their natural determination to fight for their homeland will prevail. But I'm very happy to be joined, talking to GB News, by a friend who I've worked with for years, a distinguished former ambassador, former foreign minister of Ukraine, former ambassador to London, Vadim Pristaiko. Vadim, how do you see things 2 years after this evil invasion? Are you still confident your country is going to win?
Thank you, Boris. You've seen yourself that, unbelievably so, but Ukrainians sort of feel that it's not just spring coming to Kyiv, today it's quite warm in Kyiv, but there is the hope rising. Maybe because people like you and so many foreign dignitaries came, and they're coming not empty-handed. They're coming with ideas how to get back to Ukraine, to bring it up to the agenda of the world, how to bring the weapons, how to ramp up sanctions, how to get Russians' money be frozen all around the globe to help Ukraine to actually regain territory and regain hope.
And if you had a message to GB News viewers about what you think the UK should be doing in particular, is there one thing you'd pick out?
I believe that's my years in UK were the pinnacle of my career, not because I was happy to be in London, which is great, I mean, by itself, but because of this great support of the people there. And the government, people, regions, everywhere I felt it. I've seen Ukrainian flags. I remember everything we've done in the parliaments, or even just talking to the soldier or person on the street who was inviting the Ukrainian refugees. All of this mounts out to what we felt in the UK, and it was actually been translated all over the Europe. You were pushing the Europeans and sometimes our friends over the pond to do more and more. Look at where we are now. They're supported by Germans, supported by France, supported by all our allies. We wouldn't be there without the UK's initial push.
Thank you very much. And don't forget, folks, although things look tough for Ukraine and have looked tough for the last 2 years, the simple facts are that they've kicked Vladimir Putin's armies out of more than half of the territory that they originally occupied. About 315,000 Russian troops have been killed or injured, a ratio of probably 7 to 1 when you compare it with what the Ukrainian armed forces have suffered. They've taken out thousands and thousands of Russian tanks, 40% of Russia's Black Sea fleet, and yet Ukraine's exports are now back up to pre-war levels. So I've got absolutely no doubt that with the right support from the West, Ukraine can win. And it's vital in the months ahead that we give them that support. This is an unconventional report, but here we are in Kyiv on the sad second anniversary with a Ukrainian population that, in my view, is absolutely determined still to win, and they're going to win.
And you can re-watch that interview later if you're having trouble getting to sleep. Now, let's have a look at my nominees for Headline Hero and Backpage Zero in the company of Diana Moran, Laura Dosworth and Chris Wilde. So, Diana, who is your front page hero?
King Charles is my hero because as a former cancer patient myself, I'm admiring how he's coping with what's going on. We don't know what's really going on. And also, I love his appreciation of all those cards, and his sense of humour comes out.
Oh, there you go. Great shout. Who's your headline hero, Laura?
Oh, good one. Well, I'm going to nominate Alison Pearson. Obviously, she says eloquently what the rest of us think every week in and out in her Telegraph column. But she wrote an amazing piece this week called Not in Our Name, and she wrote it for British Friends of Israel, organisation we are co-founders of. And it was all about the deplorable shenanigans this week. You know, I think, given your monologue, you would love it. People can read it at britishfriendsofisrael.org. But the reason I want to nominate for her is she is really brave. I can guarantee you, as a friend of hers, every time she puts her head above the parapet, she comes under a lot of fire for this. She's a hero. She's very brave.
Briefly, brilliant stuff. Now, Chris, your zero is Lee Anderson.
Yes.
Laura's zero is Lindsay Hoyle for scrapping the vote, and that's the same for Diana.
It is.
We'll finish on your hero, Chris. Who is it? Briefly,
Samantha Morton. She won the BAFTA. Actress. She dedicated her BAFTA to every child in the care system, which I am one of these people. I am a caregiver, so yeah, she is a hero.
Listen, can I thank my brilliant pundits, my excellent team, and most importantly, you for your company. We're back tomorrow for Mark Dolan Tonight. See you at 9. Headliners is next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Greg Dewhurst. We'll see some frost and fog forming through tonight, but we do have some heavy rain moving into southern parts of England and Wales as we go through Sunday and into Monday, courtesy of this area of low pressure. Met Office warnings already out for this part of the world through into Monday morning. This evening, though, plenty of dry weather across the UK, some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to fall away overnight below freezing, -7 or 8 across the glens of Scotland. Some mist and fog patches forming, but by the end of the night, cloud and rain pushing into southwest England. So wet start here to Sunday morning elsewhere. A grey start in places, some mist and fog patches. But once these clear, there'll be plenty of sunny spells, particularly across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Cloudier generally for the rest of England. Wales, with this rain slowly pushing its way eastwards across southern counties, turning heavy at times. Some localised flooding is possible. For most temperatures near average, 7 to 9 Celsius, 10 or 11, but the strength of the wind just making it feel colder here. For Monday, early rain across the southeast, some uncertainty how quickly this will clear away, but for many after a chilly start, it will be a fine day, plenty of sunny spells, just a few showers, but quite a keen east-northeasterly breeze, particularly in the east. Over the next few days, it stays unsettled with further spells of rain, temperatures generally near or a little above average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK. We're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag, so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody. And this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. We start with some breaking news this hour. The UK has launched a fresh wave of attacks against Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has confirmed RAF Typhoons joined US allies in attacking various missile and drone launching sites. It's the fourth set of attacks the UK has taken part in response to Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The Ministry of Defence says it targeted 18 Houthi targets across 8 locations associated with the rebels' underground weapons storage facilities, missile storage facilities and air defence systems. It also added that the greatest possible care was taken to minimise any risk of civilian casualties. The UK has reaffirmed its commitment to Ukraine as the country's war with Russia enters its third year. £245 million has been promised to boost critical stockpiles of ammunition. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, says he's proud that since the invasion, the UK has trained 60,000 Ukrainian troops, adding that no one has done as much for Kyiv than the UK. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been in Kyiv. He's been speaking exclusively to GB News, praising the war-torn country.
They've taken out thousands and thousands of Russian tanks, 40% of Russia's Black Sea fleet, and yet Ukraine's exports are now back up to pre-war levels. So I've got absolutely no doubt that with the right support from the West, Ukraine can win. And it's vital in the months ahead that we give them that support. This is an unconventional report, but here we are in Kyiv on the sad second anniversary with a Ukrainian population that, in my view, is absolutely determined still to win, and they're going to win.
Lee Anderson has been suspended from the Tory party. It comes after the former deputy chair said the London mayor had given the capital away and was controlled by Islamists. The Prime Minister was under pressure to react after Sadiq Khan said his deafening silence was condoning racism. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's weighed in, saying Rishi Sunak's weakness means that Tory MPs can act with impunity. A spokesperson for the party's chief whip says the MP was suspended for refusing to apologise for his comments. In a statement, Anderson said, "I fully accept they had no option but to suspend the whip in these circumstances. However, I'll continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia." And thousands of cards of support have been sent to King Charles following his cancer diagnosis. The monarch laughed as he read one of them, which had a disgruntled dog on the front saying, "At least you don't have to wear a cone." Around 7,000 cards have been sent from around the world offering good wishes, with one child writing, "Never give up, be brave, don't push your limits." Others shared their own experiences of cancer, urging the King to stay positive. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Josh Howie, and joining me to make mincemeat out of Sunday's newspapers is the grinder Paul Cox and the awful Lewis Schaefer. How are you both?
Lovely, thanks, Josh. All the better for being here.
I'm liking the ties, haircut, a new tie, Lewis, as well.
I used to be the best-dressed person on this show, and look at Paul. Look at how he's doing this deliberately.
You changed me, Lewis. You changed me.
Yeah, you do. I think this is such a competitive. This is the thing that people don't see. They think, oh, Paul is Mr. Nice Guy. He's totally competitive.
You know, the other thing they don't see, of course, is that you're wearing shorts.
Yeah, he's not wearing anything.
I'm just taking them off.
Those are not shorts. Those are very dangly shorts.
He's got to let it breathe. But you're right, Paul. I'm not sure how I feel about you adding the waistcoat
I know.
to
Do I look like I've escaped a wedding reception just to quickly do the show?
You know what? You got here. That's the important thing. Right, let's have a quick look at the front pages. We're going to have the Mail on Sunday first. Hypocrite. Rayner's £48,000 profit on council house sale. Telegraph. Bodyguards for MPs as extremism threat rises. Observer. Islamophobia. Starmer turns on Tories over toxic rhetoric. Sunday Times, bodyguards for 3 MPs as safety fears rise. Sunday Express, Rishi, $5 billion to fire up engine of the North. And the Daily Star, you're the devil in disguise. And those were your front pages. Paul, you're up first. Let's kick off with the Sunday Times.
Sunday Times, bodyguards for 3 female MPs as safety fears rise. Now, a private security company is being deployed to protect MPs amid warnings that the Israel-Hamas conflict is a generational radicalisation moment. And it's difficult, whilst that's quite hyperbolic, it is quite difficult to argue with it. We are finding ourselves in a situation now where people are genuinely scared for their own safety, and it all
MPs are elected leaders.
Absolutely. And, you know, what makes Britain great is democracy. And what makes democracy great...
I don't know, Wetherspoons, I would argue.
Yeah, and what makes... yeah, that's a good point. Let's have a debate on that.
I would have democracy, but can you really get a breakfast for £3 and a pint?
Well, you probably can at Parliament. But I would say that what makes democracy great, and I sound a bit like Donald Trump here, is the fact of being able to speak freely without violence, and that is increasingly becoming not possible.
Well, certainly when I'm hosting when Lewis is on.
Yeah, that gets pretty dangerous. I've had to learn origami.
Well, you do so well at it. Yeah, this is not a good story for, as you say, our liberal democracy. But also, I mean, Lewis, why are they hiring private security firms and not just having the police do their job?
Well, that's a good point. Basically, because we can't trust the police, and everyone knows they can't trust the police. They did a horrible job defending. The point is, it's not democracy. Every time I hear about democracy, it's a question of whether people are willing to stand up for themselves, whether their country can be safe. It has nothing to do with the free speech. Countries without free speech have MPs.
The people's government has spoken.
I disagree with you. You're my enemy now for looking as good. A little thing like him looking the way he looks has destroyed my faith.
You know what's destroyed my faith? Is the fact that you don't care that I seem to be... I'm wearing a suit.
You are looking very good, actually. That's a great tie.
No, it's not a great tie. It's not tied properly.
We are probably discussing the most serious story we're going to cover tonight.
The thing about Josh is you're a typical English person. Frumpy, frothy, ill-kempt.
Are you sure you're talking about Josh?
Yes, look at the one he got a new suit. It just doesn't fit him. It doesn't fit him. The haircut isn't the
That's not true. It's not fair.
Anyway.
Let's get back to the story here. What's interesting is you have 3 female MPs talking about how they don't feel safe, having to get private security guards. At the same time, you have someone like Jess Phillips, who tweeted yesterday, Labour MP, said she was on the tube and she was having a great conversation with all the people who were at the protests. And it's like, yeah, because you're saying what
they want to hear.
We want to
say.
So why don't you say to them, oh, guys, let's free the hostages?
Jess Phillips is not stupid. She knows her constituency is made largely of Muslim constituents. She knows how to speak to keep her position in power, and saying things like that is only going to help her. Jess, you absolutely know there's a problem, and saying things like that does not help anyone.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
We know there's a problem. Why are we even discussing this? It's something that can't be. The country's lost its way. I shouldn't say this.
Wow. Okay, that's.
We just witnessed the breakdown.
Well, look, so maybe there's something more positive in the Telegraph.
No, it's you know, the news.
We've lost our way.
There's no good news. I usually say good news, but it's no good news. Speaking of good news, I got my good news cup that I'll show a little bit later. Is according to this, is they got BBC proud to be progressive, says the boss, and the boss is this guy named Tim.
All right, I'm just saying.
I'm prepared.
Oh, sorry, okay. Sorry.
He's the,
sorry,
no.
I undermined you.
It's all right. You don't undermine me. You can't, because my position is rock solid. and the people know that. They know you can interrupt me. What's going on in my brain is so detailed and amazing. Yeah, anyway, so he says the BBC was set up to avoid party political bias. Mm-hmm. And they avoid political bias, but they don't avoid the big bias at the time, the battle between Team World and the British people. The two teams, and some of the British people support Team World, like the
I think this is wider than Team World. This is arguably woke culture. As he says, it's
woke culture is Team World.
They're tied. There's a connection. But what he says is there's the BBC walks a joyous tightrope in the culture wars. Now, what's interesting is there are some people who would argue the culture wars actually aren't real, or this kind of manufactured way of holding back progressive politics or sort of occupying people so they don't notice that they're... their money is being taken away from them.
If we imagine, this woke wave as some sort of parade, the BBC are right at the front with a flag. The reason that he's saying this is because he has actually enabled most of this woke behaviour. And I would say that there is nothing wrong with being progressive, but we stopped being progressive about 10 years ago and then lost the plot and carried on going.
Well, it became regressive. That's the point. There's that famous graph where basically the progressiveness keeps on going and then it starts going downhill, which is what we've seen with critical race theory. When you take some of these ideologies to their end conclusions, you have regression.
He just said, you said it, because I didn't finish the point, because he said he's proud to be progressive. And progressive to him, he had to backtrack and say it meant technological progressive. But the truth is that everybody knows what progressive means. The people on the progressive side knows what it means, and the people on the non-progressive side, which is probably the people who are watching this, except for the people who are complaining.
Well, the other thing that he says here, he says we've got to make sure that we're clearly representing views from across the board. Now, this was in January 21. Yes, but they've massively failed. So what you saw, I mean, really, the whole point of this channel being set up was that they didn't represent views across the board. They didn't represent it with Brexit. They didn't represent it with gender ideology. There's been so many failures along the way to actually cover the news, to cover these issues that are affecting people. And the argument is they've failed, sure.
Yeah, the BBC have set themselves as judge, jury and executioner. They've even got their own Verify. BBC Verify. That doesn't verify itself every time it steps out of line, which is about 4 times a day. So it's just mass hypocrisy for me. He's got a very difficult job. Of course he has.
It doesn't have a difficult job.
Well, it looks difficult from the outside.
The point is, the BBC was set up to have no party political bias, because there was only one channel, and Labour didn't want the Tories to get an advantage.
OK, but I would argue that we're not talking about party political bias, because we're talking about issues that transgress these.
You're not listening to me, Josh. You didn't listen to me.
You did say the first part. OK, let's move on to the Mail on Sunday, Paul.
Hypocrite.
You think Tim Davis thinks he's got a hard job?
You are forgetting your role in this. You're supposed to be the host of this show. You're supposed to let Paul and I battle each other. And
I battle you both.
Man to man, skin to skin.
Come on, Mail on Sunday, Paul.
Hypocrite. That's not Lewis. Rayner's £48,000 profit on council house sales. So Angela Rayner, this is, of course, very famous Labour MP, you may have heard of her, has been accused of hypocrisy after it was discovered she made £48,500 profit on her ex-council house thanks to the Right to Buy scheme, the one that she wants to reform. Now, I do feel a little bit for her here, because the fact that she benefited from the market being... the market price of her house being worth more than when she paid for it, it's outside of her control, and she had every right to sell it. Now, of course, it's seen as hypocrisy because now she's going to remove that from future generations, or she'd like to reform it. And the idea here in the Mail is that she will reform it to a point that future generations won't be able to benefit from it. But this feels a little bit opportunist to me. I mean, the fact that someone's actually gone back and looked to see...
Opportunist of the journalists.
It does seem that way to me. I mean, I'm all for...
Yeah, but isn't that what journalists are supposed to do?
Oh, no, journalists looking up pesky things like...
Are we being opportunistic here, just making fun of it, whatever?
So opportunist. You know what, I agree with you on that. And if you actually read about her life story, it's pretty impressive, whether you agree with her politics or not. What's she's been through.
Of all the things to criticise her for, making a profit...
But but at the same time, there's an argument that she is being a hypocrite here. Then, of course, we're all hypocrites.
But we don't know what the reforms are going to be, Josh.
We don't. Right, Daily Star. Let's finish on that, Lewis.
You're the devil in disguise. Evil AI bots get the habits of copying bishops' voices to con nurses out of thousands of... nuns, same thing.
Don't care if you con nurses.
Out of thousands of pounds.
Party you've been to, isn't it, Lewis?
I mean, this is hardly a news story, basically, because this is the bog standard how AI is bad, and it is bad. Jonathan Kogan showed me how he was able to manipulate a voice and send Josh a message today.
A very rude message.
And the message said, "Don't interrupt Lewis."
No, that's not what it said.
It did
what's interesting about the story is that I didn't know nuns actually had money.
They should have. Yeah, that's a good
point.
point.
Spend it on if they do.
All right, look, that's the front page is destroyed. We continue the carnage in part 2 with Farage, Anderson, and Reform. Hey, that's our primetime schedule. See you at 2.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves, people are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel, and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Josh Howie, and because security has gone home, still here with Paul Cox and Lewis Schaefer. Paul, let's kick off with the Sunday Express, and be careful what you say in the story. I just saw them hanging out by the hot chocolate machine.
Yeah, good point. So Nigel Farage calls on cancelled Lee Anderson to join Reform and destroy the Tories. Now, most of our viewers would have been following this today. We certainly have.
Don't presume.
Well, OK, so let me just give you a little bit of background. So following the removal of the Conservative whip from Lee Anderson, effectively being suspended from the party, for refusing to apologise for comments he made about the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, Farage has sensed an opportunity. And he's
very good at that, isn't he?
He's very good at that. And he's put out an olive branch and said, "Do you know what, Lee? Come and join us, mate. Come and join us, because if you join us, we can destroy the Tories." Now, I would question whether that in itself would be enough to do so. But, however, if he was to defect to Reform now, my understanding of that situation would be that Reform would have its own MP in Parliament.
It's an interesting one, whether it comes through. I mean, Reform are arguably the reason why Tories look like they're going to lose, because they're eating away so many Conservative votes.
They're not beating Labour, they're beating themselves. However, to be fair to Lee Anderson, he has spent a lot of time knocking doors saying, don't go for Reform, stay with the Tories.
Of course, Lee Anderson famously went from Labour. Yeah, that's a massive fly. I was just trying to ignore
the whole time.
Giant fly.
It's a Russian fly.
This is what happens.
It's on your tie now.
I should explain that Lewis, he eats meat and brings it in with. He brings these flies in with.
I mean, this is impacted, of course, by the fact that Reform have announced some new policies just this weekend. They are planning.
Oh,
Jesus, not quite Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. There will be serious animal rights protesters outside soon. So Reform have not only... They're really beating the Tories at being Tories now, because their policies now include pledging to pull the country out of the European Court of Human Rights and freeze all non-essential migration, as well as giving tax cuts away. So we end up... Reform actually out-conservating the Conservatives, all on the back of what's happening with Lee Anderson at the moment.
Yeah.
And perhaps if he does defect to Reform, it might be the start of something. I doubt it, though.
But it's not about them beating the Tories or destroying the Tories. The Tories, from what I can tell, I'm not from this country, but they're not very Tory. They are Tory. There's two types of Tories. There's the Tories that are in, like Rishi Sunak.
I'd say there are seven types of Tories.
Can I speak?
And I want you to list all 7 types of Tories. Go. Keep going, Liz.
Obviously, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Give us the 2 types of Tories. Who are the 2?
The 2 types of Tories are the Tories that are in the pockets of Team World, of the...
Lewis, get some new material.
There's one war going on.
Next up is Observer. Let's see if we've got some new material here. And Lewis, I don't know about you, but I was relieved to hear that there's no such thing as Islamist extremists.
Do you know what? You know what? You take the story, Josh.
Why?
Because you're going to interrupt me halfway through.
I'm not going to interrupt you.
The most important thing of what I say is when I realize what I've said and I realize it's wrong. That's
how you form your opinion.
Yes.
Now tell this story.
Where I will say something.
I won't interrupt you.
The thing is, this is all Gaza all the time. News is that they're protesting.
This isn't Gaza. This is the UK. Sorry, I had to interrupt you there, because this is the UK.
You don't think I was going to get to that point? What do you think I'm an idiot? I'm an idiot. I didn't say it.
Lewis, my career depends on you not swearing.
Oh, sorry about that. You think I am a bit of an idiot, but I know. I'm trying to say this. This is demonstrations. They're demonstrating all across the country right now, and this is that they blocked off Tower Bridge, which is the bridge that the Americans supposedly wanted to buy from this country, and they were massive demonstrations, and so there are protests going on, and so this is the thing. It's all listen to me, British people, don't worry about what's happening in the country. You will have advance warning that the end of the world is coming when they start going after the Jews. But up until that time, everything is fine. So, wait a second, they're going after the Jews.
Okay, sorry, Paul. Now, what it doesn't say here is people letting off flares. This is illegal, and what it doesn't say is, was anybody arrested?
No, you can't arrest people. You can arrest people, but not these people.
Not Islamists?
No. You can't do that, Josh.
OK.
Is that what you're asking for? Because you're not going to get that, mate.
That would be mental.
You're outrageous. Please take that back. Of course, this is all with the backdrop of there being peace talks, ceasefire talks, I should say, rather than peace talks, where they're gathering in Paris right now. And when I say they, I mean Israel, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. Now, I need you two to help me out here, because none of them sound like Palestine. So who is negotiating on behalf of...
Well, I'm guessing Qatar, and then with Iran speaking via them.
And also Egypt, too. But the point is that they're building a wall to keep... The Egyptians are building a huge wall, a Trumpian wall, to keep the Palestinians out. And I think this is what the whole thing... The Israelis are basically waiting for the Egyptians to get their wall in place before they do this. This is what I've heard from really good sources.
Well, look, no one wants obviously any civilian casualties. If this can end it, if Israel can get their hostages back without having to go in and risk, obviously, IDF...
We rightly talk about the casualties, particularly the children and the women. Very rarely, however, do we talk about the fact that there were 253 Israeli hostages and still well over 100 of them are still...
Well, I happen to... Sometimes.
When I say we, I'm not including you in this, Josh. Yeah. But however we don't, the discourse doesn't include it, and that's what started this. Give the hostages back.
There we go. Right, Sunday Times next, Lewis. And this is how you make your extra cash, isn't it?
You know what? It sounds like a good way to make money. Reveal the middlemen ripping off foreign workers for care visas, and this is in the Times. But the truth is that what the story is that people. There was a Facebook ad, and an undercover investigator spoke to a guy from Facebook who was advertising for help in obtaining a care visa, and he said, I'll help you with the visa, but it's going to cost you £6,000. And somehow this is like big news. This is what people do. Lawyers do this. People who want to help, they'll charge money for helping you go through the system. That's
what it turns out that you don't have to pay that at all. The guy could have just done it himself.
He could have, but he wanted the help.
However, I think there's a lot of truth in what you say, Lewis, because no one has to pay for anything. You can be your own solicitor in court. You can conveyance your own property when you're selling. But of course, you do need people because they understand the system. They talk about this like they're backstreet characters doing dodgy deals. You'll probably find this is the Sunday Times. I bet if you flick towards the back of the Sunday Times, there's probably an advert there for a solicitor or a lawyer who would do just this for you, or any other thing you want to pay them for.
Yeah. Well, the numbers I had no idea. So they're closing a loophole in March where carers can bring their dependents with them. And I had no idea that last year there were 103,000 carers coming over. We have a massive shortage still in this country of carers, but they brought over 120,000 children with them. So double, again.
We need to be open about this. We don't have a shortage of carers. We have a shortage of people being paid the right amount of money to care. Yep. And we've got a bunch of loser people going into care homes. And maybe if they took better care of themselves by eating a meat diet and avoiding the hospital.
Wow. I've never heard someone blaming
I was
old
so
people.
on board.
And you know what? The old people that are watching this show are the same people who are going to be using those care workers.
I can't believe that you are criticising old people. You're the oldest person we know.
I know.
3 years, 3 years left.
I know. There's going to be an article about me being a hypocrite for using these carers.
All right, let's finish this section with the Sunday Telegraph. And French farmers are angry, which is a first.
Yeah, absolute first. A group of French farmers stormed major Paris farm fair on Saturday ahead of a planned visit by Emmanuel Macron, of course, as the French president, amid angers over costs, red tape and green regulations. Of course, these protests are quite the opposite of what we've been used to seeing, which is Just Stop Oil, etc., Extinction Rebellion, all of those good people.
These people have jobs.
These people have actual jobs, and not just jobs that feed the world.
Yeah.
Like Michael Jackson would say. These people are feeding the world. I mean, Lewis would argue that all you need to feed the world is one big cow, but these farmers... One thing I would say, there's something kind of... what's the word I'm looking for? Counterproductive about this particular protest, because this farm fair is a major event. Like 500,000 people turn up to this thing. Yeah. It's once a year. It's in Paris, and the one people that have stopped it are the farmers.
So it's for them, really.
Yeah. So they're saying we need to make money, and then they storm.
I mean, Lewis, the mental thing for me about this story is that there are 600,000 people who go to a farm show.
I know, I saw that too.
What is wrong with French people?
No, but this is happening. This is in Paris.
What
in
are you
Paris.
supposed to do? Oh, I went to Paris on a romantic weekend. I went to the farm shop.
I bought some organic honey.
On a tractor.
But imagine a farm fair in New York City. It's like, maybe let's have a farm fair right here in London.
To be fair, every Sunday, 500 million Brits go to a garden centre.
Yeah, but this is slightly different.
In the country.
Yeah, right. We're at the halfway point, but come back for some weak comedy and beta males, and we're also going to talk about some stories. See you then.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this
Yes?
training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each
Why
other.
do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Sunday's top stories. And Lewis, let's get straight into the Metro. And you were just saying how you don't rate either of these comics.
That is not true. That is not true. I mean, I know Joe Lycett, and he recognized me.
Oh, so you think he's the funniest guy in the world?
Well, I don't know who Ricky... I mean, I like Ricky Gervais, but he's never said hello to me.
He
or
watches
anything
the show,
like that.
actually.
He might do watch the show. But this is big news, because Joe Lycett basically trashed comedically weak Ricky Gervais on a podcast.
You shouldn't add your own parts to that.
I didn't. But you know what it is? It's really... So he accused Ricky Gervais of punching down on, with his jokes in the Netflix special on his podcast. But the truth is, it's really... And I like Joe Lycett, but you should never trash another comic, at least publicly. I mean, behind the scenes,
That's what WhatsApp groups are for.
You won't ever see me say something bad about Josh. You won't ever do
Not
that.
publicly.
No, but
Just usually to his face just before we're going to come on air.
It is an interesting one, Paul, because Ricky Gervais, arguably, his stand-up isn't the best of his creative output. I think some people would go along with that, although they're incredibly successful. But what frustrates me particularly is how Joe Lycett is attacking him for... Ricky Gervais say, oh, he's attacking trans people. And it's like, no, it's much cleverer than that. He actually is he's attacking trans ideology or gender ideology. There's a massive difference between the two. I find it very disingenuous to be making it about that. And also, like, mate, just focus on yourself.
Yeah, he's conflating.
He says, talking about a comic focus.
Yeah, we have to do this, and I think it's like an unwritten rule. We probably shouldn't do this, and I would advise Joe not to as well. But he's conflated a couple of things there, like you say. The joke is not aimed at trans people. The joke is aimed at people who blindly buy into the ideology.
And violent extremists.
And violent extremists as well. That's a good point. To say it's not his best work, well, it might not be, but I'd love my best work to get all the awards he's got. You know, I'm being facetious, but at the end of the day, Ricky Gervais isn't just getting these awards because he's average. He's getting these awards because we're measuring him by his own high standards. One thing I would question here is somebody literally said to me a few months ago, oh, it must be hard being a comedian. Don't you miss being racist and homophobic? He said that was their actual words. I'm willing now, Joe, to bet 100 English pounds that somebody did not say that directly to you. Just get them to tweet. Get them to tweet me, and I'll pay £100 to charity. But there's no way anyone wanted up to Joe Lycett and said that.
You know, we know we're professional comedians. We know a lot of comics. I certainly push the boundaries, but I don't know anybody who's doing racist or homophobic material. Like, you can push and talk about gender ideology, you can talk about it, but no actual people I know, anyway, and doing the alternative comedy circuit, or our comedy circuit, are doing anything like that.
Well, people used to. I think you're totally right. I mean, back in the day, people used to make fun, in this country especially,
of the
other, because the other wasn't living in our communities. They used to make fun of black people because there was no black people in their community, maybe in a coal mine in Wales or wherever they're performing. But now there are people everywhere. There are gay people everywhere. Your audience has trans people. Everybody knows people who are trans. Everybody knows people who are on the left and the right. So every audience, you have to be.
I just don't think that comics are bigoted that way, apart from when they're
some are.
But actually, and the other thing I want to say is, just to finish that quote, he said, now comics are doing more interesting things, and I think that that's just not true.
That is also
There's
not
so
true.
much comedy now. It's become so boring, and this is what it is, because I'm not the person who came up with this. But the idea is that you have very diverse bills now, which is nothing wrong with that in its own right, of course, but they're all doing the same material. They just happen to be ethnically diverse or gender diverse or whatever it is. But whereas before comedy bills had different types of comics talking about very different things, now you've got everybody pretty much talking about the same stuff in the same way.
There are things in Joe Lycett's defence here. First of all, I like the way that he discussed it. There was no mention of cancelling Ricky Gervais. There was no mention of directly people shouldn't go and see it. However, he did point out that he wouldn't see it, and he thinks he should be cleverer. He has. He watched it, and to be fair, he makes the point that there is more interesting comedy, in his words, and there is a huge market for it because people are selling out theatres. And that's difficult to argue with, because that's true. It's largely Soho theatre, and Joe himself could sell out, I'm sure, close to arenas. I'm sure he could travel the country selling...
I don't think he could do arenas.
But he could definitely do large theatres. And do you know what? I want there to be a space for every comic and every type of material.
I do, as long as they're funny. Right, moving on to the Sunday Times, and Paul, some BBC scriptwriter has learnt Spanish.
Yeah, incredible, this story. BBC accused of plagiarising new series from Spanish drama. So, the commissioning of BBC's The Ministry of Time was announced this week, and it's described as an epic sci-fi romance and thriller that is utterly unique. Although, is it? Because it has a striking resemblance to a title of a Spanish series, El Ministerio del Tiempo, which means, I believe, the Ministry of Time. And that was created by two Spanish chaps. However, they're saying, the BBC, that it's created, that what they are doing, which is extremely similar, is created by a British author, who's written a novel that is yet to be published. So it's not to be published because she hasn't finished writing by the sound of it.
Well, it sounds like it's finished, but it's just unpublished at the moment.
Yeah, OK. But a bit like my book about a small wizard called Harry Peter, which is coming out next week.
Very good. So, I mean, these things happen, though, don't they, Lewis? People have similar ideas. It's sort of out there in the ether, and then... Yeah. This happens. All the time you get Armageddon, you get Deep Impact, showing our age.
Well, you know what it is? It's like the idea of going through time and changing time and things happening through time is one of the oldest science fiction tropes. Can I use that word, tropes?
Yeah, of course you can.
It's say the time machine. There's Doctor Who, isn't he going through, like, time? Yep. I don't know if he is. So the fact is, what's really horrible about this is the BBC is the state broadcaster. So when they do something wrong, it's an embarrassment on all of us. If it was ITV that did this, you wouldn't care, because those horrible people at ITV. But when it's the BBC, it's embarrassing to all of us.
Well, you know what they haven't said here is, and this is a possibility, is that actually the Spanish scriptwriters might have travelled through time, come and watched the BBC version, and then gone back to 2015 and done their version.
Yes, that's a good, very good.
That's my.
I think that's the most plausible way through this.
Of course. Yeah. More Sunday Times, but not for the sick, Lewis.
Well, this is good news. Strike hit hospitals cancel 1 in 10 routine appointments. Here's my good news mug. It says good news with an atomic bomb, and there's Louis Schaefer laughing. And this is what's happening. The doctors are going on strike. They've been on like perennial strike because they want 35% more money. And so they're having a 5-day strike beginning on Saturday. But the truth is, first of all, junior doctors are real doctors. They've got the worst name in the world. They should strike to get rid of that name, junior doctors, because they're doctors. And they have a bad name, which is what that is, and they work for the NHS, which is.
Let's not give them more reasons to strike.
Can I finish my point?
Sorry, what's your point? Finish your point.
Don't swear, Lewis.
And they're working for the NHS, which is
Great point, Lewis.
which is a pretend healthcare service with a really good name. The truth is. We don't need doctors. We just need to take care of ourselves.
Paul, this is slightly damning. I mean, 10%. This has real long-term impact on people's lives here.
I was going to be facetious and say if all the junior doctors strike and only 10% of routine appointments get cancelled, what's the point of junior doctors? Because that's the average amount of appointments that get cancelled every day on the NHS. But of course, I don't want to be facetious because this is real life and real people, which we don't often get to discuss in this way. People will be affected. Undoubtedly.
No. We don't know that. The Israeli doctors... No, don't interrupt me. The Israeli doctors went on strike, and you can Google this. They went on strike, and the death rate went down. The fact is, most surgeries are unnecessary, and we can be healed by taking care of ourselves physically, by eating the proper food, by reducing stress, by increasing sun. Take care of yourselves, all you old people who are watching this channel.
OK, yeah.
Look at how great I look.
I want you to follow him on Twitter. Right, Sunday Telegraph.
Follow me on Twitter.
And Paul, does this mean that we're not going to go to Pride Month every alternate month this year?
Yeah, Pride Month, Pride Decade. Objecting to Pride movement, not homophobic, says the Tory party. So let me give it a little bit more context. This says a chap, I assume chap, because his name's King Lawal, a Christian councillor in Northamptonshire. He was subject to a 4-month investigation, Josh, for tweeting that pride is not a virtue, but a sin. Now, I'd say that was homophobic. However, we'll get back to that and we'll have that debate. He was cleared of wrongdoing on the grounds of expressing his religious beliefs. So they haven't cleared him and said he's not homophobic. This is the extrapolation that the Sunday Telegraph have taken. They cleared him on the basis of his religious beliefs. And you know what? That's OK. What we've got now... What we've got now is 2 tribes. We've got the DEI tribe versus the church tribe. And I'm not sure... We're going to have to learn to live with it because these 2 monstrous tribes are not going to give in.
Yes, it's we have to make the distinction here because you're right. The full tweets, it's sort of he starts talking about the pride Satan fell with the archangel. Pride is not virtue but a sin. It seems to be like he is talking specifically about homosexuality here.
Yes, it's homophobic.
But there is there are many people I know who are gay who are somewhat sick of the overextension of Pride. Pride isn't just like a one-day event. It just goes on and on and on.
That's something else, Josh. He's not. If you read,
I know it is something.
If you read
That's
the
not
tweet, he
exactly what I was
speaks
saying.
against pride. He's not speaking against man laying down with another man. He's not thinking that. What he's thinking about is pride is a sin. So this is not a homophobic tweet. It isn't homophobic. He's against, his religion is against pride. It says it's a sin. He doesn't say...
So two things can be true at once.
Yeah, he might believe that homosexuality is a sin, but he's not saying it here.
Fine.
OK?
Right, just the final section to go now, and we've got some fun to keep you up. We've got Joey Barton's obsession with serial killers, no sex tendencies, and an overweight American. See you in 2.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
Well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, and let's kick off with the Mail on Sunday. And Joey Barton is making friends and influencing people.
Joey Barton calls Alex Scott the Ted Bundy of presenting. Now, Joey Barton appears to have stumbled across a winning formula here. Serial killer plus sporting female presenter equals woke tears. Now, I'm not suggesting he's right, but that's the point. He's quite clearly wrong, and he's figured out this formula now. I would say we need to treat... Alex Scott is nothing like Ted Bundy, OK? Ted Bundy...
Thank you for saying it so I didn't have to.
Absolutely, right? No, Ted Bundy was quite the orator, actually. He could have presented.
He knew football.
He did. But
soccer.
That's not the point. And it is unfair on Alex Scott. But Joey Barton knows that, OK? He's creating... But
I think he's trolling.
Yes. but for a very good reason. He's actually a really articulate guy. I've listened to a couple of podcasts with Joey Barton on where he discusses this. And do you know what? I wouldn't want to debate him on it. He knows his stuff, and he's coming at this from the right angle, I feel. But he obviously keeps making these comparisons because it gains further. He knows it's going to work. There's no way that Joey Barton is typing that Alex Scott is like Ted Bundy.
He's complimented her in the past,
of course,
as a presenter and her football knowledge, which I think is different to the people that he was comparing last time, because they did seem to be, and I don't even know anything about football, but they seem to know about as much as I do.
So I would say he has a point when it comes to meritocracy, and his point is all about meritocracy. The way he goes about it, well, that leaves a little bit to be desired, and Joey will know that himself, and he could do things differently. However, Joey Barton has never done things differently to this. If I followed football for all my life, Joey Barton is about the same age as me. Joey Barton was like this as a player. Joey Barton is like this as a commentator after he's playing. He says what he thinks. So from some respects, it's a breath of fresh air, because he is saying things others wouldn't. By making these comparisons, I would argue that it's unhelpful, but what he is doing is bringing into the limelight the whole argument about meritocracy in any field. If we are just taking D, E and I and cramming it in everywhere, then if we did it here, none of us three would be here.
I agree with Paul, because Joey Barton is thinking what everybody else is thinking. They're thinking this woman is the Ted Bundy of presenting. Everybody's I've listened to this woman.
That's what you
Alex Scott. I was thinking that. The point is, this is such a non-story, because what does he mean by the Ted Bundy of presenting? That the woman is well dressed? Ted Bundy was very well dressed, that he was well spoken, that you know what I mean?
You know, I'm going to give you a counterpoint here. Personally, I was very offended by what he said, because personally, I think that I'm the Ted Bundy of presenting. Sunday Express next.
You are the Ted Bundy. You're killing Lewis Schaefer. I'll tell you, that's what you do.
Good. Sunday Express next. And Lewis, what advice do you have for this fat American?
She probably is fat, but then most of the world is fat. Everybody who's listening to us is fat. And
everybody but you.
Everybody but me. I look amazing. I weigh 77.6 kilograms today. I look really good. I mean, my skin is falling off, but I'm going bald too.
His testicles through the bottom of his trousers.
Yes, they're not even my testicles. Anyway, it's the news is good news. There's some American woman on TikTok says she doesn't like what's going on in the UK, and some of the things that she complains about, that the bread has a hole in the top of it. Well, I guess air gets in there, or whatever it is when
it says we have holy bread.
You have holy bread. That the small portion size. She complains about teenagers in Nando's. My son works in Nando's.
Oh, and I didn't know he was doing so well.
Yeah,
not that there's anything wrong with working in Nando's.
Exactly. That's so elitist. Your kids are coming.
You know what? I went to Nando's recently with the family, and they were the nicest people I've ever had deal with us in a restaurant. Like, going in with a big family, normally people will roll their eyes.
Yeah.
They were genuinely nice people.
Well, that's what this woman's complaining about.
I apologise.
But the truth is, what makes this thing so amazing is that English people, British people will read this and they'll think, this woman knows nothing about our country. They know nothing. She knows nothing about how horrible the people are in this country, how devious the people are, how they don't love Lewis Schaefer as much as they should. The real big issues.
Do you have an issue with this, the free sauces that are unhygienic because everyone uses the same bottle?
I have no issue because my stomach acid is one of the most acidic in the whole in all of the animal kingdom, and so I don't have to worry.
My stomach acid.
Yeah. There's a silver client said no gun crime though, and she gives a big old list of
no gun crime.
I bet, but you're not going to get shot to death.
But what is really bad about this country, Paul? What's really bad? Paul knows what's bad. That they bring in foreigners like Lewis Schaefer.
He does not think that.
There we go. Star now, Paul, and surely it'd be weirder if a landlord did want you to have sex.
Yes, that's a good point, actually. Not the point that I was going to make, but it is a good point. Creepy UK landlords banning Brits from having sex in bizarre tenancy agreement. So just when you thought the country's landlords couldn't get any worse, and apparently that's what we were all thinking, it has been reported that some are asking tenants to sign agreements which include no sex clauses, which my wife's actually asked me to sign one of these as well. I didn't
Maybe
know
you should stop charging her rent.
I didn't know this had carried on quite that far. I mean, the more you read about this, you think, oh, this is terrible. However, there is a character at the centre of this story. His name is Chris, and he's 24. And the landlords that are stopping him having sex or putting it in his tenancy clause are two brothers that he lives with.
Oh.
So they don't want to see, they don't want to hear him having a good time.
Basically, Paul is too loud. No, you know what? We're going to do very quickly, very quickly. Mail on Sunday. Lewis, they're a politician. Get me out of here. What's going on with this story?
This is a long way to go just to trash Nigel Farage, and which he almost won this I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. And they said, we don't want any, this is what the rumor is. We don't know if this is true. We don't know if anything is true in these newspapers. But it says that because Farage, the ratings in last year wasn't as high as the year before, that they don't want to hire any.
All right, do the story quicker next time, Lewis. Show's nearly over, so let's take a quick look at Sunday's front pages. Mail on Sunday, hypocrite, Rayner's 48,000 profit on council house sale. Telegraph, bodyguards for MPs as extremism threat rises. Observer, Islamophobia, Starmer turns on Tories over toxic rhetoric. Sunday Times, bodyguards for 3 MPs as safety fears rise. Sunday Express, Rishi, $5 billion to fire up engine of the North. And the Daily Star, you're the devil in disguise. And those were your front pages. That is all we have time for. Thank you very much to my guests, Paul Cox and Lewis Schaefer. There's his mug. And Lewis, we've got Leo Kurz back here tomorrow, 11 p.m. with Nick Dixon and Lewis Schaefer again. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Thank you.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Greg Dewhurst. We'll see some frost and fog forming through tonight, but we do have some heavy rain moving into southern parts of England and Wales as we go through Sunday and into Monday, courtesy of this area of low pressure. Met Office warnings already out for this part of the world through into Monday morning. This evening, though, plenty of dry weather across the UK, some clear spells, and this will allow temperatures to fall away overnight below freezing, -7 or 8 across the glens of Scotland. Some mist and fog patches forming, but by the end of the night, cloud and rain pushing into southwest England. So wet start here to Sunday morning elsewhere, a grey start in places, some mist and fog patches. But once these clear, there'll be plenty of sunny spells, particularly across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Cloudier generally for the rest of England. Wales, with this rain slowly pushing its way eastwards across southern counties, turning heavy at times. Some localised flooding is possible. For most temperatures near average, 7 to 9 Celsius, 10 or 11, but the strength of the wind just making it feel colder here. For Monday, early rain across the southeast, some uncertainty how quickly this will clear away, but for many after a chilly start, it will be a fine day, plenty of sunny spells, just a few showers, but quite a keen east-northeasterly breeze, particularly in the east. Over the next few days, it stays unsettled with further spells of rain, temperatures generally near or a little above average.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night, and this is the Saturday Five. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Amoncona, Ben Leo, Benjamin Butterworth, and Belinda de Lucy. Tonight on the show,
Lee Anderson should apologise to Sadiq Khan.
I want to celebrate dad bods.
We need to stop all legal aid funding for Shamima Begum immediately.
It's time Rishi Sunak kicked out Liz Truss and the Trumpite Tories.
and a world exclusive from Boris Johnson in Ukraine. It's 7 p.m. and this is the Saturday Five. Welcome to the Saturday Five. In the House of Commons, it's been a week of rows, arguments and people's integrity being called into question. And if you want a break from such ugly scenes, then I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. However, no debates will be cancelled here and nobody will be walking out either. If we haven't got rid of Benjamin Butterworth by now, we're never going to manage it. He's here, as usual, along with other argumentative types in the form of Belinda de Lucy, Albie Amoncona and Ben Leo. Now, everyone's going to get around 60 seconds to outline their argument about a chosen topic. Then we all pile in and the backstabbing begins in earnest. And of course, we want to know your views as well. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we start tearing each other apart, it's your Saturday Night News with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you. Our top stories from the GB newsroom. Lee Anderson has been suspended from the Tory party. It comes after the former deputy chair said the London mayor had given the capital away and was controlled by Islamists. The Prime Minister was under pressure to react after Sadiq Khan said his deafening silence was condoning racism. A spokesperson for the party's chief whip says the MP was suspended for refusing to apologise for his comments. In a statement, Anderson said, "I fully accept they had no option but to suspend the whip in these circumstances. However, I'll continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia." The UK has reaffirmed its commitment to Ukraine as the country's war with Russia enters its third year. £245 million has been promised to boost critical stockpiles of ammunition. The Defence Secretary says he's proud that since the invasion, the UK has trained 60,000 Ukrainian troops, adding that no one has done as much for Kyiv than the UK. Grant Shapps says the West will keep going for as long as it takes to fight Russian aggression.
This is a package which will help to provide some of the artillery that's required, particularly on the front line, where Russia has really boosted their production levels. So it's massively important now that we stop Putin. It's going to cost us more if he came further, not least, of course, being terrible for our Ukrainian friends, but it would also be disastrous for the rest of the West.
Meanwhile, the King and Queen have praised Ukrainians for their true valour. King Charles also says he's greatly encouraged by the efforts of the UK and its allies in supporting Kyiv at a time of suffering and need. The monarch was paying his respects at a Ukrainian cathedral in central London, where crowds later gathered to show their support for the country and its people. Commemorations began with an interfaith prayer, and similar services have been held across the UK. The body of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been handed over to his mother. He unexpectedly died in prison 9 days ago. His death certificate suggested it was of natural causes. His spokeswoman says it's still not clear whether authorities will allow relatives to hold a funeral the way his family wants and the way he deserves. And junior doctors in England have walked out for the 10th time since March last year over a pay dispute. The British Medical Association has asked for a 30% pay rise. The government calls that unreasonable. More than 1.3 million appointments and operations have already been cancelled or rescheduled since industrial action began. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to the Saturday 5.
It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes and things are about to get lively. Let's crack on with tonight's first debate. Folks, as you well know, we're teetering on the edge of a world that's more dangerous than a viper's nest. We're staring down what I'd call the axis of evil. Russia, China, Iran, a trio hell-bent on erasing the West from the map. Kicking things off today, we've got a GB News World exclusive. None other than former Prime Minister Boris Johnson stepping up to bat for Ukraine 2 years on from Russia's invasion. He's laying it all out, making a solid case for why British taxpayers should keep digging deep to support Ukraine in their David versus Goliath battle against bad Vlad. It's a high-stakes game and Boris is playing for keeps. Let's have a listen.
Hi folks, I'm here on the second anniversary of Vladimir Putin's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. I'm here in Kyiv, where, in spite of everything, those gallant, heroic Ukrainians are fighting on. And I've got absolutely no doubt that they are going to win. And I think that with the support of the West, provided we do the right thing, give them the right support militarily, politically, and economically, the courage of Ukrainians, their natural determination to fight for their homeland will prevail. But I'm very happy to be joined, talking to GB News, by a friend who I've worked with for years, a distinguished former ambassador, former foreign minister of Ukraine, former ambassador to London, Vadim Pristaiko. Vadim, how do you see things 2 years after this evil invasion? Are you still confident your country is going to win?
Thank you, Boris. You've seen yourself that unbelievably so, but Ukrainians sort of feel that it's not just spring coming to Kyiv, it's today is quite warm in Kyiv, but there is the hope rising. Maybe because people like you and so many foreign dignitaries came, and they're coming not empty-handed. They're coming with ideas how to get back the Ukraine, to bring it up to the agenda of the world, how to bring the weapons, how to ramp up sanctions, how to get Russians' money be frozen all around the globe to help Ukraine to actually gain territory and regain hope.
And if you had a message to GB News viewers about what you think the UK should be doing in particular, is there one thing you'd pick out?
I believe that's my years in the UK were the pinnacle of my career, not because I was happy to be in London, which is great, by itself, because of this great support of the people there. And the government, people, regions, everywhere I felt it. I've seen Ukrainian flags. I remember everything we've been done in the parliaments, or even just talking to the soldier or person on the street who was inviting the Ukrainian refugees. All of this mounts out to what we felt in the UK. And it was actually being translated all over the Europe. You were pushing the Europeans and sometimes our friends over the pond to do more and more. Look at where we are now, supported by Germans, supported by France, supported by all our allies. We wouldn't be there without the UK's initial push.
Thank you very much. And don't forget, folks, although things look tough for Ukraine and have looked tough for the last 2 years, the simple facts are that they've kicked Vladimir Putin's armies out of more than half of the territory that they originally occupied. About 315,000 Russian troops have been killed or injured, a ratio of probably 7 to 1 when you compare it with what the Ukrainian armed forces have suffered. They've taken out thousands and thousands of Russian tanks, 40% of Russia's Black Sea fleet, and yet Ukraine's exports are now back up to pre-war levels. So I've got absolutely no doubt that with the right support from the West, Ukraine can win. And it's vital in the months ahead that we give them that support. This is an unconventional report, but here we are in Kyiv on the sad second anniversary with a Ukrainian population that, in my view, is absolutely determined still to win, and they're going to win.
Well, there we are, a world exclusive from Bozza. Benjamin, I mean, coming to you first, we'd heard there about the pivotal role, that's how it was described, that Boris Johnson played in calling up European allies and saying, look, come on, we need to get behind the Ukrainians, they can win this. 2 years on, how do you actually manage to keep the support of a British public that's saying, hang on a minute, I'm struggling here at home, never mind some far-off land that doesn't really seem to be pushing back the Russians all that much?
Well, look, Boris Johnson is absolutely right on the principle that we should be supporting Ukraine as much as we can. And he's sort of a hero figure in that country because they've recognised that level of support. I think it's about £12 billion since the Crimea invasion, and including what we've yet pledged, that the UK has put forward to help Ukraine. So there's no doubt that this is a huge amount of money. I think the government's just announced another £245 million. But I think you have to learn from history. You know, there are still people around that can remember the mistakes that happen when you let a dictator, someone who doesn't care for international rules or an order-based system, who wants to take out other countries. We know what happened in the Second World War, and I think we should be acutely aware that that is a series of events that could happen if Britain doesn't stand up to Vladimir Putin. So good on Boris Johnson.
So, Ben Leo, at the start there, I said, look, we've got this axis of evil. Right, we've got Russia, we've got China, and we've got Iran. They're all ready to chomp away at the West. And this is bad Vlad's first move. Surely you must be with Boris Johnson.
Well, first of all, I want to know the absolute truth as to these rumours and claims, which initially came from the Ukrainian side some years ago, before Tucker Carlson even mentioned it in his interview with Vladimir Putin, that Boris Johnson scuppered a peace deal in 2022. Boris denies it, of course. Putin says he did. But as I said, the Ukrainians some years ago even suggested he did as well. So if that's the case, I want to know why that happened and Boris is now begging British taxpayers for even more money. I agree that Ukraine needs the money. However, when's it going to end? And is it a bottomless pit of taxpayer money, especially when people this side of the pond, our country, Brits, they're struggling to heat their homes, to even get housed, to feed themselves. When does it end?
Albie, when does it end? And I guess watching that, you'll be clamouring to get Boris Johnson back in the Conservative Party.
Look, I will not clamour for Boris Johnson to be getting back anywhere near the Conservative Party leadership, despite the fact, I think, what he's done with Ukraine and his whole support of that cause is probably one of the best things that he did during his premiership. But I think Ben actually raises a very interesting point. And this question about where does it end will become more of a feature as we get closer, especially to the US election. And if the Republicans and Trump win the US election, that question of where does it end is going to be a question that we're all going to have to ask a lot more seriously.
Absolutely. And I mean, Belinda, President Trump turning around and saying, look, Europe hasn't been pulling its weight when it comes to spending 2% of GDP on NATO defence spending. When do you actually think that they will wake up and become alive to that fact? Are they actually taking the mickey out of those of us that are doing that?
They should have woken up when Putin invaded Georgia back in 2008, when he invaded Crimea. You know, these were massive alarm bells. The EU and the whole of Europe should have woken up then and prepared for the next invasion. Even though Putin promised not to invade another country after Georgia, there he went again and took on Ukraine. And whatever people feel about Ukraine, the fact of the matter is Putin chose to invade a peaceful European country, chose to kill its men and women. That is on him, and Europe needed to respond. Because, as Benjamin said, if you appease bullies, they will just take advantage and carry on. But I would say I do agree with Ben Leo in terms of we have to be very respectful to the British taxpayer now. We are not a bottomless pit. We do need to know where there's an end game. We do need to know where the money's been spent. I say we use foreign aid instead of keep using more and more British taxpayers' money. Cut foreign aid and direct it to Ukraine instead of beating the backs of the Brits so much.
And I actually wonder, does anyone on the panel worry about giving over so much of our own military might, in the sense of we're giving away a lot of weaponry, ammunition, and we keep being told that actually, as far as the Royal Navy's concerned, you know, I might as well be going out there with a rubber dinghy defending.
We can't even handle the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. We've got aircraft carriers still languishing in Portsmouth, yet we're sending millions and millions of pounds to Ukraine. And actually, in the example of the United States, who are umming and ahhing at the moment, the Republicans especially, about sending another $60 billion to Ukraine, the majority of that money actually stays in the US. It goes to US defence firms to make weapons, shells, ammunition. So it's good for their economy. So, it begs the question, are they just...
briefly, Benjamin.
Clearly there's a question about how much money you can spend, because that's the real world. But it is very good value for money. You know, we've helped to train 60,000 soldiers in Ukraine to fight for themselves, for their country.
That's been amazing.
And as Boris Johnson stated, 315,000 Russian troops have been injured or killed, 7 times the number of Ukrainians. So we, the West and Ukraine, are winning this war, and the best way to stop having to fund it is to defeat Russia in this battle.
How long is that going to take?
For all.
How long is that going to take?
It's going to take a lot longer.
It's going to take years.
Weakened. And the fact is that
I don't think they are weakened. They've just taken a key town in Donbass. Despite all the money we've sent them, they've taken a massive key town in Donbass.
And that proves the point, because the US has been withholding the funding and Ukraine has been weakened by
nonsense.
That's why Boris Johnson is right that we should support
them. We'll find out what the viewers think shortly. But up next, it's another darling of the Conservative Party. It's Albie Amankona. Away you go, Albie.
Well, thank you for that description, Darren. Former Tory MP, Lee Anderson, had the Tory whip taken away from him today because of the comments he made about Sadiq Khan on GB News earlier on this week. Let's take a listen.
I don't actually believe that these Islamists have got control of our country, but what I do believe is they've got control of Khan, and they've got control of London, and they've got control of Stormer as well. And we've seen the shocking scenes played out in Parliament just a few nights back where Stormer crumbled. He put pressure on the Speaker to alter the rules, if you like, for the nature of the debate and the ultimate voting. And this is a result of weak leadership.
Now, how can Islamists both have control of London, but also we see that London is too woke to function, with pride flags on crossings, starting police horses, and train lines called Suffragette and Windrush? Look, mistakes happen on live TV. We all know I've made them, but I was always taught to apologise for my mistakes, and that's why I think Lee Anderson needs to apologise to Sadiq Khan for saying and inferring that he was mates with Islamists. I don't think Lee would have said that if Sadiq wasn't a Muslim. And the problem is, we do actually have quite a serious problem with Islamist extremism in the United Kingdom. Too many people have been killed by Islamist terrorists since 7/7. We had a situation in Parliament this week where Islamist extremists might have influenced the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. And yet now we're having a news story talking about the fact that a Conservative MP made a racist comment. These are playing into the hands of our enemies here, allowing them to brandish us as bigots and saying that the right are racist, when actually there is a very serious problem with Islamism. And unfortunately, Lee's comments have taken away from that. So, Lee, please apologise to Sadiq Khan and think carefully before you speak. So we're going to read a comment from Lee Anderson earlier on today from a statement that he made earlier on. Following a call with the Chief Whip, I understand the difficult position that I put both the Prime Minister in with regards to my comments. I fully accept that they had no option but to suspend the whip in these circumstances. However, I will continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. So, Ben Leo, do you think Lee should apologise?
Not if he believes what he says. No, I don't think he should ever apologise to the mob. But you mentioned that he wouldn't have said that if Sadiq Khan wasn't a Muslim. In actual fact, he went on to say Keir Starmer was also guilty of the same accusation as well. He said Sadiq Khan...
Did he say Keir Starmer was mates with Islamists?
Yeah. He said Khan, and then later said Starmer was mates and rallied.
So you don't think there's anything wrong with what he said?
I think it was very sloppy, and I agree with you. What you said, it gives the mob and the left easy ammunition to take down the right's arguments, especially Lee's arguments, and the genuine concerns about the state of play, especially in London. The scenes we've seen, not just recently with the Palestinian marches, but as you said, terrorist attacks, Westminster 2017, London Bridge twice, Batley Grammar School, kids hoarded into village halls because they scuffed the Quran. But in actual fact, I haven't got time for any of this anymore. I just think the state of politics at the moment is so low grade and is so pathetic. Most of these politicians, and I include Lee in this actually, wouldn't get a job in any decent private sector company. They behave like a bunch of school kids, and actually it's an embarrassment on this country that we're dealing with these people who are, you know, they're in power and dictating the state of play in this country. I just think it's a complete mess. I hate the vibe and the level of toxicity, and I'm looking forward to some real renewal of the state of play once Labour get in, just so the Tories or someone else, maybe Reform, can rise from the ashes and find some proper
So Benjamin Butterworth, renewal of the state of play when Labour get in, can Keir Starmer do it?
I don't know what that means, but what I do think is that Lee Anderson is telling you something about the Tories that you are naive to ignore. This isn't just a man who has made so many dodgy and unacceptable comments. For reference, he was kicked out of the Labour Party, blocked from being a council candidate years ago for being sexist. Now he's been suspended from the Tories for being Islamophobic. When he eventually joins the Reform Party, I'm sure there'll be something else that he does that's stupid. So Ben is right that he's not capable of a real job. But this is someone, despite his profound incompetence and his offensive views, that the Tory party and the Prime Minister saw fit to make Vice Chair just a few weeks ago. He's shown us who he is. He's a bigot and he's weak as a politician, and he shames the Tory party.
Are you calling Belinda a bigot then? You just said he's welcome in Reform.
Well, Nigel Farage earlier today has called on Lee Anderson to defect to Reform. I don't think he'll be back in the Tory party before the election.
Richard High should have Lee Anderson in.
Come on, Belinda, you've got right of a reply there.
Yeah, well, I do. I think I slightly agree with Ben Leo here. I think the Tories infighting and squabbling between the One Nation Tories and the sort of common man on the street Tories, common sense, talk at a pub type chap, which I think Lee Anderson is, and I do think he votes. I've just started talking, so I can finish. When he was saying what he said, yes, the language was sloppy, and I do believe as an MP you have a responsibility not to use inflammatory language, and just because someone is a Muslim does not mean that they have Islamist mates. But I do think he is reflecting concern by people that there are many in the Labour Party, not just Sadiq, up and down, who are soft on Islamism, to not call out the horrific from the river to the sea projection onto our democratic mother of all parliaments, Tower Bridge, the hateful Hamas protests. But let me just quickly finish, because it's important. You know, Sadiq Khan is not innocent. He was recorded as saying that moderate Muslims were Uncle Toms. Now, that is vastly huge slur against moderate... On Iranian telly. So people have a right to be concerned what he believes if he's said stuff like that in the past. And also, I feel that there are many people in politics, including the Tory party, who are so cowardly, they just refuse to stand up to the Islamist mob, whether they're Tory or Labour. So I think Lee Anderson is right to not apologise if he doesn't believe in the apology, because there's very rare, it's rare as hen's teeth you get men and women of political conviction now.
But Lee Anderson is a pathetic politician. This is a bloke.
No, he's not here to defend himself.
On an immigration bill, said that he changed the lobby he was walking through in a vote in Parliament because he was being mocked by Labour MPs.
Nothing.
What kind of a weak politician lets the mockery of politicians from another party change how they vote.
You seem more angry about that than all the horrific things that have been happening in the Labour Party, from a prospective MP spreading conspiracy theories about Jews, from all the Islamists.
And they were kicked out of the party, and the Tories...
Oh, delayed, but after 2 days.
Where was the
not
moral
straight away.
indignation at
Not
the
straight
Batley
away.
Grammar School, as Ben has set out there? Where was the moral indignation when all those kids were killed at the Manchester Arena bombing? Time and time again, I think you people are disgusting.
Yeah.
I think actually you have enabled this complete sewer to devolve around our country. And look what you've done to London. Our Tower Bridge right now is a complete basket case. It can't actually function.
And that's under Sadiq Khan.
It's utterly idiotic and dangerous for you to try and tie the Labour Party.
Oh, yes, but actually...
There's no need to do that.
Banishing London's... I think actually London's Jews deserve better than what you've given them. And that man that you've backed on 2 occasions in the form of Sadiq Khan.
Well, I think that is Islamophobic. Saying that because he's a Muslim that he has a problem with Jews. I tell you what, he's been very clear
say that.
about
he hasn't, as
anti-Semitism.
Police and Crime Commissioner, he has absolutely not stood up for Britain's Jewish
Benjamin, he allowed it to be projected onto our Parliament.
Exactly.
Do you know how frightened Jews are in London? He is the mayor. He's allowed 2-tier policing and given a soft touch to those Hamas-supporting protests.
I'm going to do you as a service. We're ending it there. Still to come tonight, though, good news for real men everywhere. Belinda de Lucia is backing the dad bod. And speaking of dad bods, Liz Truss is supporting Donald Trump. We'll see what Benjamin makes of that. But next, it's Ben Leo. He'll be discussing Shamima Begum and whether it's right that she continues to receive huge amounts of legal aid. I'm sure Ben will be up for personally funding Shamima's campaign.
Yeah, right.
You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK. We're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, cheers very much for your company and your emails. Gary's written in about Ukraine and Boris Johnson. Gary says funding Ukraine through controversial aid charities is only ever going to prolong the conflict with Russia. But Kath has an opposing view, and Kath says, I don't get why people moan about giving money to Ukraine. We should all just be grateful that we here in Britain live in a peaceful country. So that's two sides of opinion.
Not so much anymore.
Well, up next, it's Ben. Ben, what have you got for us tonight?
Right, this is going to be short and sweet. The nation breathed a sigh of relief yesterday as Shamima Begum's court bid to return to the UK after having her citizenship stripped was dismissed. Thank God for the Court of Appeal judges. Well done. As a reminder, Shamima Begum, she was the ISIS bride. She ran off to Syria in 2015 with her schoolmates, decided to join the terrorist death cult who, if you don't remember, burned people alive in cages, stoned women and children, behaved in the most barbaric way. Shamima had her citizenship stripped. She's now languishing in a Syrian refugee camp. But my point is, she's now going to go with her Golden Goose lawyers to the Supreme Court to try and overturn that Court of Appeal decision bid yesterday. And do you know who's going to pay for it? Me and you. Up to £5 million worth of legal aid is going to be spent if it reaches the Supreme Court, and even more if it goes to the European courts as well. I say she is a British traitor. She's no longer technically British. We should not be paying a penny more of her legal aid when there's so much money needed and better causes here back in the UK. Benjamin, do you agree we should rid our hands of Shamima? No more legal aid. She needs to stay in that refugee camp in Syria and spend the rest of her days there.
No, I don't, because although the price is high in terms of the cost of legal aid for a case going on this long, that is the price of a democracy and a functioning justice system to which we should all want to belong.
She's had justice.
Because you don't know if you might end up in a situation where you can't afford to fight a case where there is a human rights question.
I'm sorry.
And the truth is that it's not a judgment to say that what she has done is right. What she's done is very, very wrong. But I think there is an inherent racism in the treatment of
for joining a terrorist group. You absolute
because
joker.
The only way they can legally attempt to justify taking away her British citizenship is because one of her parents was from Bangladesh. It is illegal
and they don't want her either
to leave somebody stateless. She is our responsibility, our problem, and should be in a British prison.
If she was Swedish or German or American and the same situation was happening, would you call that racist in that?
You wouldn't even hear about the case.
Or is it just because it's Bangladesh?
That wouldn't happen because there's no way we would try and send them to Sweden because they wouldn't accept.
Sorry, this is utter rubbish. Jack Letts, white male, got his British citizenship revoked because he joined ISIS before all of this. So white male happened to him. What are you talking about? It's about racism. Every single person who joined ISIS who has dual citizenship should have it absolutely stripped.
But she doesn't have dual citizenship, and it is based on a claim about her parents' birthplace for which she has no connection.
Which obviously the courts think is fair enough. British citizenship is precious. It is a privilege.
Right.
It is a privilege.
Not a privilege.
Let me finish. If you want to dilute it by having a dual citizenship and have allegiances to other country, have the privilege of working, voting, living in another country, there is also a cost.
Can I remind you?
And the cost is if you commit serious crime on your bike, goodbye, you lose the privilege of British citizenship.
Can I remind you some of the things Shamima Begum has said since she escaped, so she calls it ISIS? She said that the Manchester Arena bombing was, quote, justified because of the way the West had behaved in the Middle East. She told a BBC reporter that she was attracted to join ISIS initially because of beheading videos. And then she also said that she was over the death of her 3 children. Does that sound like someone you want walking the streets of Britain?
No, there's no question about whether what she did right or wrong. And I'm the only person on this programme who's had an interview with Shamima Begum where she said she regretted the things that she said in the past.
She did.
But this is a question for a justice system. It's not about whether what she did was right or wrong. It's about the fact that she has a right to British citizenship.
There is no justice because I tell you why there's no justice. Anyone who commits a crime on foreign soil will not get the the justice that those poor Yazidi women deserve. They deserve their day in court with her in Syria, because the laws in this land will give her a slap on the wrist and let her out in 6 months. So stop talking about justice. There will be no justice for the Yazidi raped girls and the murdered Yazidi boys, for Shamima Begum in this country.
The other week you were talking about why you oppose the death penalty, and yet you're effectively accepting it for her here. She may well be burned alive
penalty
in her
here?
tent.
That's a reach.
Because there's a serious risk that the place where she is in northern Syria, that she'll be killed alive.
She's
in her tent.
fine.
Do you really think that would be an acceptable form of justice?
She shouldn't
You
have
sound
gone.
like ISIS. When you
Oh my God!
Benjamin. To join ISIS,
Yes.
she should reap what she sows. I'm glad that her citizenship has been revoked, quite frankly, and I speak as a person in a similar situation to Shamima Begum. I've got a claim to foreign citizenship. I don't have any problem with people like Shamima Begum never being let in this country.
And do you know what? My biggest
I thought
concern
you were
is...
about to say you were a member of ISIS there. Actually, do you know what? I have absolutely no confidence that actually British justice would stand up and say
I don't even
this
think there's a
person
law.
has time and again said that she does not regret everything that has happened.
And she'll be out on the streets in a couple of weeks if she
I
gets...
also find it really rich, by the way, that the Labour Party turn around and say, oh, she was only 15. They want to give 16-year-olds the vote.
And Brianna's killers were only 15 and they got sent away quite rightly for
My
life.
concern is how many more Shamima Begums are walking the streets of England right now.
Well, there we are. Still ahead, though. We've got Belinda de Lucy talking about dad bods. What more could you possibly want from a Saturday night? And next, we've got Liz Truss, who's been getting mixed reviews for her foray into US politics. We'll find out what Benjamin thinks. You're with the Saturday 5 Live on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Your emails are flying in, as usual, on Shamima Begum. Lots of views. Judith has written in. Good evening, Judith. She says, some will say Shamima is being used as a scapegoat, but if we let her back, it will set a precedent for other terrorists or would-be terrorists to claim the sympathy vote. And Jane says, Shamima Begum was groomed as a child. We need to be more sensitive. Thank you, Benjamin, for writing in as Jane. Now, next up, it's time for the next debate. Up next, it is indeed Benjamin, and we're going to hear what the wokest person in Britain has to say for himself.
Well, we're talking about the curious case of Liz Truss. Now, if you were on holiday in the autumn of 2022, let me just tell you that she was Prime Minister for a few days. She'd always been a strong supporter of internships. I just didn't think that we'd have an internship for the office of Prime Minister. But good for you, Liz. I hate when people mock her for that. But now she's gone from being a Commons clown to being a dangerous conspiracy theorist. The other day, she was speaking at a very right-wing conference in the US where she claimed that we have a deep state controlling Britain and an elite that is not letting the people be heard. This is conspiratorial stuff. She then sat next to Steve Bannon, the guy that masterminded Trump. And while he sat there and praised Tommy Robinson, the convict Tommy Robinson, who many would call an outright racist, he's called Tommy Robinson a hero. And Liz Truss, our former Prime Minister, nodded along. And then, to make it even worse, she said that we should have Donald Trump back as US president, something that 2 UK ambassadors to the US have said would be incredibly dangerous for the West, something Liz Truss claims to care about. So look, I get that, the only thing you're known for is crashing the economy and barely being able to get through a 3-minute local radio interview. You probably would want to be known for something other than that. But I don't think being a wacko conspiracy theorist is it. So here's my pitch. If we've got a second Prime Minister watching the show tonight, in Rishi Sunak, I say to you, Rishi, it's time to remove the whip from Liz Truss and show your leadership. Now, we've actually got the head of the Liz Truss Fan Society with us on the programme tonight. Ben Leo, thanks for joining me. What do you think? Do you think that she's undermining Britain?
How is she undermining Britain?
With this conspiratorial stuff.
Why is saying the deep state conspiratorial? Over here, we just call them quangos, the civil service, Whitehall being obstructive. That's what the deep state means.
I don't think it is. She's trying to say that there are illicit people out there controlling the country that aren't doing what the people want.
There are. Nadine Dorries wrote about it in her book, The Plot. She was a former Conservative. Is she still an MP? No, she's... No. Nadine Dorries wrote about it in her book.
She's not a peer either.
No, of course not. But to say the deep state is just... It's not conspiratorial. It's just talking about...
She was talking about the Financial Times and The Economist being part of some deep state which was against her free market agenda.
The Financial Times is some globalist publication linked to the IMF, linked to the World Bank.
Liz Truss is a globalist. You do know that. She's an internationalist classical liberal. She's a fan of Adam Smith, Milton Friedman and Hayek.
I've had this discussion with you on Twitter before. Globalist does not mean open markets trading around the world.
Sorry, what does globalist mean if not free markets and free trade?
Mass migration, open borders, pushing agendas such as the trans agenda and gender ideology.
Read a politics book. That is not what globalist
means. Net zero, the green agenda.
You need to read a politics book. That is not what globalist means. And also, Liz Truss is a hypocrite. She was rubbish at her job at Prime Minister. Now she's looking for any excuse.
You can't judge her on her performance as Prime Minister.
To come up with as to why she was such a failure, instead of just taking the bullet like Kwasi Kwarteng and saying, look, we made some mistakes, forgive me, now I'm going to stand down from Parliament. That's what Liz
She should lose the whip, right?
Look, I think the Prime Minister has a difficult decision to make when it comes to Liz Truss. She's just causing problems for the Prime Minister week after week after week. Quite frankly,
Liz Truss, if she was given a chance, would have been the best Prime Minister to save your party, and that's why you're in the problem you're in, Albie. Your party is about to get obliterated because the powers that be in that party took her down. Now you're stuck with Rishi Sunak and a party full of Lib Dems in disguise and members.
Liz Truss was a Lib Dem, you do know that.
Yeah, but now she's a proper Conservative. She saw the light.
She was a student.
Belinda, even Reform UK has said that it doesn't want Tommy Tommy Robinson in its ranks. And yet there's a former Tory PM nodding along to him being called a hero. Does it not make you uncomfortable?
I think you're being too harsh. I've certainly been in interviews when things have been said and my mind has been elsewhere because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next and I haven't necessarily taken in how to respond to something. She didn't agree. You're just saying you interpreted her response as a nodding along. What I would say is Liz Truss has lifted the lid on forces at work in Parliament that are not elected, that are not democratic, that have been hindering policies being driven through. I felt it very much during the Brexit years. There were absolutely civil service at work trying to overturn a democratic vote. They should have no power to do so. And Liz said, and this is one of the quotes I totally agree with, she said, as PM, she discovered that that role as Prime Minister, it didn't let you hold any of the levers. The levers were held by the Bank of England, the OBR, not held by the PM, not held by the Chancellor. This is important, very, very scary stuff, because if you're electing a party, if you have a Chancellor and PM that have no control over the economics of your country, what's the point in voting at the ballot box?
Sorry to interrupt you, Belinda. We even had the World Bank a few weeks ago saying that the Tories, this government of the United Kingdom, shouldn't raise taxes because it wouldn't be good for growth. Who are these people?
Who runs the country?
For the record, that's exactly what Margaret Thatcher said when she came to power. OK. And look, she sits there saying the wokerati and communists are controlling the country. I'm sorry, how many communists are in the Bank of England and in FTSE 100
Probably more than you think.
Well, there are a lot in schools and universities.
All right. And dare I say, let's not forget that Sue Gray, who was responsible for that Partygate report that undid Boris Johnson's premiership, now leading the Labour Party and directing everything there. So what does that tell us?
Prime example.
Still ahead, though. Some women say they prefer a dad bod to a more finely honed athletic type. But is Belinda Lucy among them? Well, it's a debate that's sweeping the nation and it's coming right up. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. Thank you very much for your emails. On Liz Truss, Anne has written in, and Anne says, as a Conservative Party member, I would still vote for Truss over Sunak, and many financiers have come around, actually, to say that her policies were the right policies. Albie Amancona has turned a shade of pink. And Steve says, Truss was never convincing, and now she's just contributing even more to the disaster facing the Tory party. You're suddenly very happy,
Oh, yeah, it's Truss's fault, isn't it? Of course.
It is all Truss's fault.
But now it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's Belinda de Lucy.
So bulging biceps, six-pack chiselled abs and beefy stacked shoulders are often seen as the ultimate package women desire in men. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But recently, multiple surveys report on average women's preferences swaying towards the common man. Active, but more soft around the edges, cuddlier versions, suggesting that the famous dad bod is becoming more of an aphrodisiac for women of today. It's horses for courses, of course, but it is comforting to see. There is ever-growing pressure on young men, especially to get that quick fix six-pack and bulk up. Social media is filled with many a Hercules pumping iron with their huge muscles with hashtag no pain, no gain and hashtag go hard or go home. And as with young girls and weight pressures, it can enforce standards unattainable to most men who, in the online perfection world, can suffer from low self-esteem too. Not to mention the lifetime of gym routines needed and super strict diet devotion that can mean little time left for date nights. I'm keen on promoting healthy living for everyone, but fitness isn't all about granite cut, zero-fat Hulk muscle bods. So let's celebrate how attractive men are in their normal, healthy body types too. I'm glad dad bods get the adoration they deserve. So I think we are going to...
We're going to... Good personal trainer.
Have you got a vested interest?
Well, not at all. I have a lot of teenagers around the house, and a lot of the young men are super sort of addicted to a lot of these fitness apps and having these six-packs and things. And I thought it was quite a nice surprise that, on average, women sway a lot towards a sort of well-balanced man who has interest in other things other than themselves. And I thought that was just nice to see that the dad bod gets appreciation too.
Absolutely, and I think, do you know what? If actually a dad bod...
Speaking as a man who has a dad bod,
how dare you? I think actually if a dad bod means that you're spending your time with your kids and working, then...
Sorry, it only takes an hour to go to the gym. You're not down there for hours just to get it in fairly decent shape.
Some people don't come into a studio for 2 minutes and talk about things for their job, do they?
I've worked 17 days straight, thank you very much, and I've still gone to the gym today.
17 days straight.
I think,
3 hours a day.
You know, I've waited a long time to have Belinda's adoration, so I'm glad... you know, it was very good of you to come out and say it.
Pleasure.
You know, I think there is a problem here, that the reason that a lot of men, young men in particular, are obsessed with their physical appearance is that it's their appearance. It's not actually about the health. In fact, I think it's very bad for their mental health. You know, I actually, on Instagram, I refuse to follow people that show constant topless photos because I think it's bad for my mental health. I don't look like that. I'm probably never going to look like that.
So let me ask you a question.
And I think I think people have an unreasonable...
Well, we've got someone here. This is our wonderful panellist, Ben Leo, showing us it's the anti-dad bod picture. Look at that.
Who's been stalking my Instagram? Can I ask you something? Why does it make you feel bad looking at people with good bodies?
Because, first of all, I think often the photos online are edited to look better than they really are.
My picture there wasn't edited. Why does it make you feel bad?
Because I'm not fat, I'm not unhealthy weight, but I feel like that if I constantly see photos of a perfect...
So why don't you stop eating as much and go down the gym and you'll feel better?
Because I don't want to, Ben. I like eating food.
But you feel bad.
The way I
You're not happy because you feel bad.
No, I feel bad if I look at ridiculous people. I mean, you know, look, we can't all achieve the peaks of your physicality. But
yes, you can.
I think that it's much healthier for people to be comfortable with a little bit of weight. I buy into the Nigella Lawson approach. You know, she's always said that she'd rather be curvy and enjoy her food than be a stick-thin model. She's right.
Well, before I come to Albie and Darren, should we take a look at some dad bod photos?